Chapter 155. But even Li Yunxin probably didn't know better than Yunzi how serious this matter was. This was the first time in the last 500 years that a true realm cultivator died in a battle between Daotong and Kenzo, 3 at once, and 1 at the profound realm. And this was the first time in the last 1,400 years that the soul of an emperor was infused with the power of will and became a ghost emperor. What the cultivators had been worrying about for thousands of years had finally become reality. Even if they were prepared, they still felt fear in the face of such a tragic result. But the cultivators couldn't think of a better way to solve this problem. Because of the social environment and the limitations of productivity, there seemed to be no better way than an emperor ruling the world. In order to avoid something like the Li Emperor, Daotong and Kenzo had always avoided the appearance of an even more powerful unified dynasty. The Li kingdom was already the limit they could accept. But now, it seemed that this limit needed to be changed again. But no matter how much it changed, there must be an emperor. The cultivators of course didn't want an emperor. In fact, every mortal emperor was a terrifying demon in reserve. But the Devis, when they first passed down the heavenly heart technique, they wanted the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo to shepherd the people and protect humanity. A long time ago, some people thought that this was a high-sounding statement, just like how the emperors of the mortal world demanded their officials to be honest and upright. And so they tested the law. Because of their personal interests, they caused the world to be in turmoil. More than 10 countries were at war for hundreds of years. Tens of millions of people lost their homes, and millions died in the chaos. And so in the next 1,000 years, there was no news from the Devis. In that era, the techniques of Daotong and Kenzo hadn't been completely passed down, and many of the more profound heavenly heart techniques still awaited the Devis divine revelation. And so in that 1,000 years, the cultivators' realm stagnated, and there were many high-level cultivators who reached a bottleneck, but couldn't find a way to break through, went mad and died. That extremely severe punishment almost severed the inheritance of Daotong and Kenzo. It wasn't until 1,000 years later, when the world's population gradually recovered to the level before the war, that the Devis revelation came again. Thus, the cultivators knew that it wasn't a joke to shepherd the people and protect humanity. Thus, from then on, cultivators might have killed mortals in private and committed crimes, but no one dared to cause a large-scale upheaval. Hundreds of years ago, the Daqing state attacked the Yi dynasty because the emperors of the Yi dynasty were muddle-headed, and the people had no way to live. Moreover, Emperor Yi offended Daotong and Kenzo. Then the heroes of the country rose up. The cultivators just followed the trend of the world. The celestial beings needed the world to be prosperous and have a large population. They didn't even care if one person killed hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of people. As long as the foundation of this world was not harmed, and the general trend of the world was not hindered, they would not personally punish some people. Therefore, there must be an emperor. In fact, the cultivators were not only worried about the emperor. Li Yunxin once asked Ling Kongzi a question that cultivators would also ponder over. The soul of an emperor was instantly turned into a demon when it was infused with the power of wish. As for the famous great demons in the human world, such as Dragon Sun and Hatred, who in the mortal world didn't know that they were incomparably bloody and cruel monsters? In many places, when a child cried at night, they only needed to say that hatred was here, and the child would immediately stop crying. Such great demons, when the population of the world increased in the future, would become tyrannical like the Ghost Emperor. Human cultivators had limited talent in cultivation. Although their numbers would gradually increase, the future was predictable. However, those demons, connate great demons, postnatal great demons, and great demons born from the power of wish would all flourish with the prosperity of humanity. Yunzi knew the thoughts of the two sages and the high-level cultivators. This time Lu Ling killed Dragon Sun, but it was actually a test. That Geo-Dragon Sun wasn't particularly powerful, but its identity was extremely special. After killing it, Daotong would then subdue the Wei River, and it would depend on the reaction of the demons. Human cultivators and demons had lived in peace for tens of thousands of years, and now, it was indeed time to do something. This time, Emperor Li had become a ghost emperor. 4 high-level cultivators had fallen, and one of them had been crippled. In Yunzi's eyes, it was already an obvious sound of war drums. Daotong and Kinzo would not tolerate such a loss, and Daotong and Kinzo would definitely take revenge. The letter said that when the ghost emperor escaped, his soul dharma was already broken, and his body and soul almost disappeared. However, after all, there were still many believers, and hundreds of millions of people were sustaining its life bit by bit. In time, it would definitely recover. As for Yazi, the second son of the dragon, he was also heavily injured, and had fled south. Fled to the south. In the afternoon sunlight of the Shangqing Alchemy Tripod Station in the city of Wei, Yunzi slightly narrowed his eyes. To the south of the Yi Kingdom was the Qing Kingdom. The Ghost Emperor could almost be said to have escaped the pursuit. The 2 sages would not leave Spirited Mountain for this kind of thing. This meant that after it recovered, there would be another big demon in the Xian realm in this world. There were already enough powerful demons, and the high-level cultivators were not happy to see this result. So since there was one more, they had to eliminate one more, and this world would be peaceful. For example, that dragon's son Hatred who was injured and weak. The cultivators couldn't find Yazi, nor could they find the Ghost Emperor. But Yunzi seemed to have some clues. For example, the person who killed Qing Liangzi last night. For example, the dragon cult. This was a miraculous skill. And the 2 sects of Daotong had vacancies of the patriarchs. Although he did not have the highest cultivation, he was the most capable to do this. This enlightened perfected master let out a soft sigh, and the shock and fear caused by some things last night were all gone. He decided not to wait any longer. He needed to figure out whether the person behind the divine dragon cult was the one he had imagined, or not. By the time night fell, Li Yunxin had already done a lot of things, just because of Qian Sanyang's disaster. Apart from the soul of Qiao Jiesin, who was still in a daze, the remaining 4 demons were ordered around by him. At times like this, he had a lot to say, but there was really no one to talk to, so he missed the days when he was with Lu Laodao. Old Lu was a good listener, and every well-timed compliment and surprise made him feel good. This kind of person was really hard to come by. He had to find a time to settle this matter. Li Yunxin sat on a green stone by the Willow River in the city, looking at the people coming and going on the street, thinking that he would have to explain himself to old Lu sooner or later. He didn't say it before because the situation was unclear, and he was afraid that he would be too deeply involved. At this critical juncture, once he found out some things, the plan could be fully launched. This was the end of the old street of the city of Wei. In the Dai dynasty, there was a sentry post of the imperial guards from here. A few hundred meters ahead was the wide square in front of the palace, and further north was the front gate of the Yi dynasty's Zijin Palace, the Ziki Gate. But looking north in the night, the majestic Ziki Gate of the past had already collapsed, leaving only the tall remains, like a giant beast in the twilight. There was no sound of people or lights in the vast area behind it. Even the sounds of insects and plants were rare. This was because after the city of Wei was attacked and the Zijin Palace was burned down, the masters of Daotong and Kinzo set up a formation here to trap the resentment of the dead in the palace in one place, and use the yang qi and earthly qi of the city of Wei to slowly dispel it. So, not to mention insects and plants, even people who lived in this ruined palace for a few days would be seriously ill because of the resentment. Li Yunxin was sitting at the end of the old street. Opposite him was a calligraphy and pen shop. At first, he was surprised to see this shop. How could there be people selling the 4 treasures of the study in this damn place? But he quickly figured out the key. Those unsuccessful scholars of the Dai dynasty liked to come to the end of the old street, to the deserted square in front of the palace to mock the present. They were scholars. After drinking some wine, they would want to write poems and leave their names. So they needed a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. This shop made a fortune in an unorthodox way. But now there were many miraculous things happening in the city of Wei, and gentlemen believed in the principle of not standing on a collapsing wall. So the business of this shop had been slow recently. But the owner of the shop was still open. It was almost midnight, but the lights were still on in the shop. In an old shop, there was a white lantern hanging in front of the door, giving off a faint light. Because it was hot summer, the windows were not boarded, and only the door was closed. There was a faint candlelight inside, and occasionally the shadow of the owner could be seen on the paper window, not knowing what he was busy with. But there was also a faint shadow of curling smoke. There was a big willow tree next to the shop, and it was dark on both sides. There were some scattered people on the street, but they were all going home. Li Yunqing bit a green plum, and looked at the people in the shop, frowning because of the sourness. He ate half of the plum, and the person he was waiting for finally came. A fierce-looking soldier riding a big horse came out of the darkness, and walked to the front of Li Yunqing. He stood in the light from the window of the calligraphy and pen shop, but there was no shadow on the ground. As soon as he got closer, he only felt a chill. Li Yunqing nodded to him. "Hello, Fifth General. I have a question for you. Why do you look so normal?" Except for Lu Laodao, few people could adapt to his style of speaking. This Yin spirit riding a big horse, who called himself the great general of the Jinwu guards of Dawei City, Fifth Boyu, was no exception. This big ghost was like a real sane person. He hesitated for a while, and then cupped his hands on the horse, saying, "I didn't know you were Wei River Dragon King before, and I have offended you. My Majesty has already punished me. I am here to ask for forgiveness." He paused and then said, "I don't know, what does Dragon King mean by normal?" Li Yunqing couldn't help but laugh and pointed at him. "You see, this is normal. If I didn't look at you, and didn't know your identity, and only heard you speak, I really felt that you were a human. Logically speaking, you were only released after your Majesty returned to the throne. In your previous life, looking at you, you were first killed, and then burned." "Indeed," the ghost of the great general of the Jinwu guards said. But although his face was fierce, his expression was very calm, which made him look more like a human. "I guarded the front gate of the Golden Hall of the Coiled Dragon when I was alive. When Qing and I attacked, I killed countless people, and the corpses piled up like a mountain. Later, Qing and I used a crossbow to kill me. Later, Qing Ni's Golden Hall killed the emperor and burned the purple gold palace, which is why I ended up like this." "So," Li Yunqing pointed at him, "Your Majesty is not normal. But you are clearly a ghost, and you should have a very strong obsession. Why are you so normal? Dragon King, be careful with your words. Do not talk about the heavens. Your Majesty and I are friends of life and death. He won't be angry." Li Yunqing waved his hand, and looked toward the calligraphy shop across the street. The window was pushed open a crack, and the person inside was looking out. He seemed to have heard Li Yunqing speak on the other side of the street. "Diwu Bo, you should have been a loyal and honest person when he was alive, and he was still so in death." After being cut off by Li Yunqing, he was silent for a while. But in the end, he avoided the topic and continued, "I fought to the death, and was the last person to die for the country in front of His Majesty. The fall of the Great Yi was not His Majesty's fault, nor was it a crime of war, nor was it my fault. I was loyal to my duty, and there was nothing I could not let go of. Thus I did not have any obsession." What a rare person of understanding. Li Yunqing clapped his hands and stood up. His white robe was more conspicuous in the night. At this time, with the moonlight and the faint light from the calligraphy shop across the street, the person behind the window could see him clearly. "Okay, let's get down to business." He rubbed his hands. "Your Majesty has returned to the throne. I think the old ghosts near the city of Wei are all under his control. How is the investigation of those two matters? Speaking of business, this general of the Golden Guards of the previous dynasty became even more serious. He still didn't get off the horse and only said, reporting to Dragon King, "After all, it hasn't been long, so the information we got is limited. But according to the registered Yin gods attached to the inner gate, the stove, the statues, and the places where the Yin and Yang Qi converged, as well as the wandering ghosts with Taoism in the city and the ownerless monsters outside the city, according to the information from the investigation. First, the daughter of Lord Dongting Hong Nyangzi does have the means to mobilize some Yin gods in the city. Dragon King previously speculated that it was the Yin gods in the city who stole the slew of the female Taoist. I think now I can be sure. A few days ago, His Majesty sent someone to investigate secretly. Now all the Yin gods that Hong Nyangzi can use have been recorded. Well done. Li Yunqin praised with a smile. He paused and looked at the people in the shop across the street. He tapped his palm with the folding fan and shook his head slightly. Lord Dongting, that old guy, is really cruel. That Qing Liangzi told me that he and his pure-blooded relatives can't go out of Dongting because of some things. So he wants to get his daughter. First, she destroys her personal ability and becomes a red carp. Then she is killed and becomes a ghost to recultivate so that she can leave Dongting and run around for him. I don't know if Hong Nyangzi knows about this. So Lord Dongting knows what happened in the city of Wei these days? He only knows what Dragon King wants him to know. Diwu Boya said respectfully. The daughter of Lord Dongting only controls dozens of wandering ghosts, and they are all under the control of His Majesty. Good. Li Yunqin gently clapped his hands. What about the second one? Chapter 156. Secondly, it's about the beast from the Li Kingdom. Diwu Boyu paused slightly. It's only been an afternoon. Time was tight after all, so I didn't get any valuable information. Li Yunqin sighed. It's been hard on you. I can understand. Tell me what you've heard. Yes. In the afternoon, I captured some souls from outside the city. Some from the Fu Kingdom, some from the Li Kingdom. They've been dead for more than 10 days, and their minds aren't very clear. I don't know why they weren't seduced by the Yama King. After asking carefully, I found out it wasn't a beast. It's about the Li Kingdom's emperor. This second took a little longer to explain. Li Yunqin listened quietly, waiting for Diwu Boyu to tell him everything he knew. He stared at the ghost of the Jinwu guards for a while, not saying a word. The ghost general felt a little uncomfortable under his stare, cupping his hands. Dragon King, please forgive me. Time is really tight plus. I like you too much. Why don't you come and help me? Li Yunqin shook his head, letting out a long breath. Your information isn't worthless, it's too valuable. If you come and work for me, when I become the king of Shinryu, I'll give you the title of Fubo Great General. How about it? Commanding 100,000 people of my Wei River. Isn't that cool? Diwu Boya solemnly saluted. Dragon King, please don't make fun of me like this. I'm loyal to His Majesty. I won't be disloyal. Li Yunqin sighed with regret. She counted on her fingers and scolded. Your Majesty is clearly not as handsome as I am, nor is he as smart as I am. Yet, he has such an efficient, low-key, and loyal general like you. My subordinates are so amusing. Sai, forget it. We'll talk about this later. He was silent for a while, then another pacing back and forth, his expression slowly becoming solemn. He was digesting the information Diwu Boya gave him. Although it wasn't as detailed as what Yunzi knew, the combination of words like Emperor of Heaven, Power of Will, Cultivator, and Hatred was enough for him to infer the information he wanted to know. Last night, he used the 9 Heavens Thunderfire to kill Qing Liangji. Originally, Lin Luoren planned to see Yunzi's reaction and lead the trouble to Dongting, who knew that Yunzi's reaction was beyond his expectations. It was as if he was frightened. He vaguely guessed some things, but he wasn't sure. Until today, when he saw that Yunzi had not taken any action, he felt that something was wrong. And now, after listening to what Diwu Boya had said, he finally couldn't help but sigh with emotion. It seemed that good fortune was really looking after him from the unseen world. It allowed him to hear about the calamity that Qian Sanyang had mentioned, and pay attention to investigate, and even let this ghost general investigate. He killed Qing Liangji. It was an impromptu move. From the looks of it, it was the right time to kill them. If his guess was correct, if that Yunzi was indeed an intelligent person, the kind of intelligent person who was far more intelligent than the average intelligent person, at this moment, he would suspect that the one who killed Liangzi last night was Long's son. However, it was not the 9th dragon's son, but the second son Hatred. Smart people all have a common characteristic: they think too much. Only by thinking too much would one notice more clues and be able to understand the general trend from a small clue. For example, under the known premises of Qi Wen is dead, Qing Liangji was killed by the Nine Heavens Thunder Fire. Only dragons have this ability, dragon cult. And hatred is seriously injured. Smart and bold strategists will infer an amazing possibility. It was the second son, hatred, who killed Qing Liangji that night. The second son, hatred, was seriously injured. He knew that he had made too many enemies in daily life. So he fled to the waters under the jurisdiction of his ninth son. After all, there was the power of the divine dragon here. Ordinary demons were not willing to occupy this not-so-vast water, nor were they willing to provoke the wrath of the divine dragon. Then he found that his ninth brother was killed, and there were strong enemies lying in wait. So he colluded with that Lord Dongting, and followed that old thing's plan to create a dragon cult, so as to absorb some incense and wish power. The dragon cult worshipped Dragon Son Qi Wen, and hatred also had to take up the name of Dragon Son. Li Yunqin thought for a while on the spot, and raised his head to look at Diwu Boyu. His heart moved, and he told him all these ideas. The ghost general had some difficulty listening, so Li Yunqin stopped and explained some key points to him. After explaining everything clearly, he asked him, "What do you think after hearing what I said?" The ghost general was silent for a while. The Dragon King has deep plans and foresight, but ordinary people may not think like the Dragon King. Ordinary people will have doubts and will want to solve the problem. However, the direction of this consideration will also rely on common sense as much as possible, and not a strange plan. After all, this deduction of the Dragon King is somewhat one-sided. Li Yunqin shrugged. "If you were Yunzi, what would you think?" The ghost general was silent for a long time this time. In the end, he said honestly, "This general can't think of anything. I can only ask around and try my luck, or have a good talk with that Lord Dongting, or directly destroy the dragon cult." Li Yunqin curled his lips. "Asking around will expose you to the enemy's vision, and you will be killed by them. Have a good talk with Lord Dongting? How do you know that all this is not because the other party wants you to do this, so they came up with this to force you to submit? Directly destroy the dragon cult? Humph, stupid to the extreme. This method." At this point, Li Yunqin was stunned. After a while, he clapped his hands. "I said I like you." He felt that his brain had been enlightened. The original plan was to lead Lord Dongting, Yunzi, and Bai Yunqin into a three-way fight. However, the death of the emperor of the Li Kingdom tens of thousands of miles away had disrupted his plan. But because of this ghost general Diwu Boyu's words, he felt that he had some other plans. So his mood improved a little. With a swipe of his hand on the fan, he took out a green plum out of nowhere and took a bite. The ghost general stood in the night like a black iron statue. Seeing him like this, he hesitated for a while and asked, "If it's sour, why do you still eat it?" "Because the mouth has no taste." Li Yunqin thought for a while, then asked, "What's the third matter?" Because of this sentence, Diwu Boyu's face showed a strange expression. He seemed to want to express something, but because of his identity and the situation, he had to be careful with his words. He only said, "His Majesty's matters. This general can't ask. If there's a result, I think His Majesty will tell the Dragon King." After a pause, he said, "This general will be bold to say something that deserves to die 10,000 times. My Yi kingdom died because of that witch. Now His Majesty and that witch." Li Yunqin shook his head and smiled. "That's not what you think. What do you mean died because of a witch? Your head is full of futile thoughts. If your Yi kingdom was rich and the people were strong, then even if all the officials started to court death, they could still do it for decades or even centuries. Don't find excuses for yourself and throw the blame on the girl. Forget it, I won't fight for this. I still have something to do with that person. You can leave first." The general of the Golden Guard still didn't seem to agree with what Li Yunqin said, but he had already walked straight to the other end of the street. He sighed like a human, and the warhorse silently moved its 4 hooves, sliding straight into the night. Li Yunqin walked 5 or 6 steps away from the pen and calligraphy shop, and the window that had been opened a crack was closed. He didn't care and walked straight to the window, reaching out his hand and knocking on the windowsill. There was some sound in the room, but it immediately went silent. After a while, Li Yunxin knocked again. Then the person in the room said, "It's closed. I don't want to buy your things, but I want to give you something." He leaned against the window and said unhurriedly, "I have a direct guide to divine great elixirs from the Shangqing alchemy cauldron in the city. Do you want to read it?" Suddenly there was a crash in the room, as if something was knocked down again. After a while, the person in the room asked, "Who are you? I don't know you. What do you want?" Li Yunxin didn't say anything. The person was also silent for a while, as if it was uncomfortable to hold it in, but his tone softened. "I heard you talking to yourself on the other side. Are you crazy? I know you're the son-in-law of the Yu family, but you're not successful. Your wife is the daughter of a concubine from the fourth branch of the Yu family. Her appearance and temperament aren't good, so she married you." Li Yunxin played with the green plum in his hand and said slowly, "You're a scholar, but you don't read well. You don't have a brain for business, and you're thin-skinned and not good at socializing. So you don't need the resources and connections of the Yu family. But you see those people in the Yu family. In your eyes, they have no ambition and bad character. But they live happily, so you feel more and more indignant. You always want to do something different to show those people, so that the master of the Yu family will look favorably upon you." The person in the room was frightened. "Who are you? I don't have gold or silver here, and neither do my family." "My family? Yes, your family is so poor that your wife has to use jewelry as a dowry. As far as I know, the day before yesterday, your wife sent away 2 of her maids, and only kept the girl who came with her." Li Yunxin said slowly, "You didn't go home for a few days, and only did those lead mercury arts here. You're not a disciple of the Shangqing Danding sect, and you only play by yourself. Do you think you're better at alchemy than others? What's more, you've made all the money in this shop for nothing, and your child at home is crying from hunger. Brother Wang, you're a failure as a person." The person in the room suddenly opened the window and stuck his head out. It was a scholar in his 20s, but because he had been smoking for a long time, his face looked slightly older. His hair was unkempt, and he didn't know how long he hadn't left the room. But Li Yunxin had already gone to the roof. This scholar looked left and right and couldn't find him. He only whispered angrily, "Who are you? Why do you care about my family's business? What do you know? Do you know what I'm doing? What I want to make isn't those ordinary pills." Li Yunxin sat on the roof and said leisurely, "I know this too. You don't make pills, but you make gunpowder. If you ask me, the name gunpowder isn't good. Why not just call it gunpowder? But you've been refining for so long. Do you know what the Taoists of the Shangqing Danding sect use? It's just a waste of effort." Wang Sheng heard the sound coming from the roof, but he didn't dare to stick his head out to look. He gritted his teeth and thought for a while, then went back to the room and took a short bamboo stick out of nowhere. He hid in the window and poked at the roof. As he poked, he said, "Why do you care about me? Why do you care about me? Where did this lunatic come from? Hey, how do you know I don't know the formula? It's just sulfur and charcoal, fire." He poked at Li Yunxin, but he didn't manage to poke him. Instead, he poked a piece of green tile. The tile fell down and hit his wrist, and the mud got into his eyes. Wang Sheng was in so much pain that he dropped the bamboo stick and held his hand, breathing heavily. He opened his eyelids and blew at his eyeballs, tears and snot flowing down. He heard the person on the roof say calmly, "Aya, you actually know this. But you only know sulfur and charcoal. Do you know the ratio? How much salt, how much sulfur, how much charcoal?" Wang Sheng held his wrist and said angrily, "Don't tell me you know." But no one replied. He rubbed his wrist a few more times, as if he had just woken up from a dream. He hurriedly shouted, "Don't tell me you know. Ha! Quickly tell me, I. Since you've carefully investigated my wife and concubine, I'll give my concubine to you." After shouting like this for a while, the voice on the roof came again. "Why would I want your fated wife? Listen carefully. I'm only going to say it once. My gunpowder is black, it's called black powder. As for the ratio, it's 7.5. 15% salt, 20% sulfur, 30% charcoal. Mix it according to this ratio. And then use a mallet to make it thinner. And then, forget it, you should know all this. In this way, you can get the black powder. Wang Sheng didn't dare to breathe loudly. He stared with his eyes wide open and memorized it. He recited it a few times in his heart, touched something and quickly drew it on the ground, then asked, "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" The person on the roof was silent for a while, then said, "I know you're despised by the Yu family, and you're depressed, and you hate those snobs. As for me, I also have a grudge against the Yu family. You want to ask me who I am? Have I heard of the Qian family fort?" Wang Sheng was stunned for a while, then slightly frowned and was shocked. You're from the Qian family fort? Isn't that the richest family in the martial arts world of the Daqing state? Then it was destroyed by the Eagle Castle. Li Yunxin sat on the roof, silently shrugging his shoulders. It seemed that Qian Sanyang wasn't bluffing. The Qian family fort was indeed famous. He then said with hatred expressionless, "Yes, it's the Qian family fort. The Qian family fort was destroyed, but the people of the Qian family fort can't be killed completely. We originally came to the city of Wei to settle down and open an escort agency. Who knew that the agency would be framed by the Yu family and the big escort company, and now it can't continue. We'll leave the city of Wei tonight. But I think before I leave I can't let the Yu family live too comfortably. I've been observing you for a few days, and I know you're not willing to be a vassal of the Yu family, so I'll give you a chance to advance. In a few days, there will be an opportunity for you to show your talents. At that time, sigh." Li Yunxin pretended to sigh. "You've obtained wealth and power, but don't forget the disdain you've suffered from the Yu family today. And don't forget that it was the Qian family who gave you this wealth. I'm going." Then he really went. Chapter 157. But what he said before was just nonsense. He didn't expect that Wang Sheng would be able to come up with something incredible with just a few words from him. The power of gunpowder was limited after all, and it was related to many other technologies. It didn't mean that you could enter the era of gunpowder just by knowing the ratio. And it was hard to say whether the raw materials in Wang Sheng's hands were useful or not. But Li Yunxin didn't need to see any results. He just wanted to make a mark on the road and bury something. If there was a chance, or if something really happened as he imagined, the bait would work. He walked on the street of Wei City, and couldn't help looking up at the night sky. What a familiar night sky. Only a few familiar stars were missing. The history of this world was at least a written history. It had been nearly 30,000 years. But something was not quite right, at least according to his experience. It was getting more and more interesting. He walked through the streets of Wei City at night, and even went to the Shaohan Street that he destroyed last night to have a look. It was easy to see ghosts when walking at night, but for him, it was ghosts looking for him. After a while, he turned around on the street. "What's up?" A woman in a black palace dress with a butterfly wing bun walked out from the shadow and said softly, "Your Majesty has good hearing. The police officer is about to pay his respects to you." "Ah, it's you. I thought you were a pheasant." Li Yunxin looked at her up and down. After sizing her up for a while, she smiled. "You're such a beauty in your human form. I couldn't tell when you were a cat, but looking at your facial features now, could it be that your ancestors are Persian cats?" The woman in black, who was named Warning by Li Yunxin, bowed her head slightly and smiled. "Your Majesty, I am a cat girl." Cat Slave was originally a monster that didn't understand human affairs, so how would she know about the bloodline of her ancestors? "Fortunately, Your Majesty taught me the right way of cultivation, and now I have a human form. Your Majesty likes it, and that's my blessing. If Your Majesty..." She moved closer to Li Yunxin while talking. Li Yin put up a finger. "Don't stick to me. I am still a child at this age. But don't say his name like that in the future. Seeing that you are a beauty, Chief Sergeant always makes me feel like there's a drama going on." The cat demon stopped in her tracks and said, "As you wish, Your Majesty." Li Yunxin thought for a moment and said, "I know that there's a police ferry in the Red Tower. From now on, you should address him as Sheriff Chong. That's what it means to be a long-term warning." The cat demon raised her head and smiled shyly and happily. "Yes, Cat slave will be called sheriff from now on. So, what business do you have with me? The black cat replied, replying to your majesty. According to his majesty's orders, the four of us, as well as the young lady of the Qiao clan, possessed the clay figurine that was being worshipped to absorb the power of will and cultivate Dao techniques. Apart from Miss Qiao, who is still muddle-headed due to the long delay, the four of us have already begun to mature a few days ago. Recently, the four of us have been acting according to the king's orders. We've been doing some miraculous things. The villagers near the Egret continent have all become our dragon cult's followers. We've also followed his orders. Those who don't believe in gossip, we won't make things difficult for them. His Majesty once told Mrs. Sanhua that once the weather near the Egret continent is right, they should come to the city of Wei. So Mrs. Sanhua sent me to ask my Majesty, what should we do next? Li Yunqin listened to her words and felt quite surprised. This little cat was articulate and quick-witted, like a real person. No wonder Sanhua didn't say it herself, but asked her to. Even Sanhua didn't speak as cleanly as her. He previously sighed that Diwu Boyu was calm and experienced in doing things. But now it seemed, this little cat also had potential. But that's all in the future. Li Yunqin asked again, how is Daoist Lu? Replying to your majesty, Daoist Lu has been cultivating hard recently. His cultivation is the highest. He has already broken through the state of mind. Li Yunqin exclaimed in surprise. Although the lower the state of cultivation, the easier it was to improve, and that Lu Laodao had a good foundation. Plus Shirquizi also said that Lu Laodao's talent was very good. But Li Yunqin didn't expect it to be this good. From the time he taught Lu Laodao the water cloud force until now, it's only been 2 months. And he has already broken through the state of mind. He himself was a genius among geniuses. But from cultivating Dao to breaking through the state of mind, it still took him half a year. What the hell? Luckily he had already taken over Dragon Sun's body, and was cultivating Shen Dao and painting Dao. Under the situation where he had enough power of will, the speed of improvement wasn't something a human cultivator could compare with. Otherwise, as a teacher, he would be surpassed by an older disciple. Where would he still have face? But thinking that old Lu, who had been depressed for almost his entire life, finally had a chance to shine, Li Yunqin still felt a little more carefree. That Daoist Lu was experienced in the ways of the world, and his early experiences were also extraordinary. Previously, he was a yes man and a calculative person in the streets, but that was because the world of mortals had buried his edge and sharpness. Now that he had received the true teachings of Dao, and once again revealed his outstanding talent, he might just be the second fifth Earl. Li Yunqin used the folding fan to knock on his palm, and smiled. Good. I've already set up this Wei city. It's time to enter the city to work. But there's no rush. I still have some things to settle. Wait for my news. You go back first. These few days. If some strange people sneak into Egret State to scout for information, don't touch them. I'll take care of them after I finish my work. The black cat nodded and said softly, I'll follow your orders, my king. Then let's go back, Li Yunqin said and rose up like the wind, and in a blink of an eye, he was several miles away. In the morning, he had already appeared in Egret State's Sanhika Dragon King Temple. According to his orders, the people of the dragon cult did not touch the Dragon King Temple. But the temple devotee of this temple, Kuan Yangzi, was killed by the master he worshipped, and his soul was refined into a soul bell. So he couldn't find a temple devotee to replace him. There were originally 2 boys in the temple, but the day after their master died, they ran away with the money left behind by Kuan Yangzi, as well as the gold and silver candlesticks worshipped in the temple. Thus, the Dragon King Temple became deserted. Occasionally, people from Wei City or other places would come to pay their respects. But now that the temple was almost empty, they did not have the thought to come again. After a while, until today, when Li Yunqin entered the temple, the first thing he saw was salted fish drying on the ground. When this Dragon King Temple was first built, a lot of effort was put into it. The ground in the courtyard was made of flat, large green stones. Even after all these years, it was still better than other places. It was like calling a monk bald in front of a monk. The person drying the fish definitely did not know that the current owner of the temple was a salted fish. He went straight through the courtyard to the main hall and saw that the incense table was empty, except for an angry statue of the Dragon King. He sensed it. It seemed that the spiritual power was still there. So he called softly, Red Madam, I have something to say to you." After a few words, there was no response. So Li Yunxin walked out of the temple and sat in the wooden pavilion where he met her last time. He waited for a whole day. He saw the sun slowly set behind the mountains, the heat on the ground gradually disappeared, and the birds returned to their nests. He saw the bright moon rising from the west, the bright stars in the sky, and the Milky Way in the sky. Red Madam had not come yet. Li Yunxin was not in a hurry, and waited patiently. He waited for 4 hours, until the second watch period. Finally, he saw a little candle light rising from the water. He stood up and saw Red Madam with a red lantern in her hand. She looked as pretty as the last time he saw her, but she did not look good. This was what Li Yunxin felt. In fact, Red Madam was still forcing a smile on her face. She was pushed into the pavilion by the water under her feet, and then said, "We met the day before yesterday, why did you call me again?" Her tone was not happy or even polite. It seemed that she did not want to see Li Yunxin. This was completely different from her appearance 2 days ago. However, Li Yunxin only solemnly bowed to Hong Nyangzi. "Hong Nyangzi, do you know of an earth-shattering news? The Emperor of the Li Kingdom. Alas, I knew it was because of this matter that you came." Red Madam sighed and sat back on the railing she was sitting on before. She looked at Li Yunxin for a while, and then said, "What kind of person are you? You should know. The things in the city of Wei and the Wei River are not things you can get involved in." Red Madam's expression kept changing in the candlelight. "You want to avenge your friend, and you wander around. But in fact, many things will happen whether you do it or not. I heard that you pretended to be a disciple of the dragon cult on the street in the city of Wei, and wanted to ruin the reputation of the dragon cult. That night, some people fought in the city of Wei, and even triggered the 9 heavens' thunder and fire. Are you really not afraid?" Something happened. Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. No matter from Red Madam's tone or behavior, it meant that something had happened. These things changed the attitude of the demon within 2 days, which was probably the reason why she came late. But it was a good thing. He contacted with Red Madam to find out the situation on the side of Lord Dongting. Lord Dongting was a 3,000-year-old great demon, and he was astute. He looked like an ordinary human being, but that was because he didn't care. The great demon was powerful, and many things could be solved with the word kill. So he didn't care about other details. For example, that night in Mount June. So he tried to save the country in a roundabout way. And now it seemed that this was the right way. Red Madam's mood seemed to be unstable tonight, which was an excellent starting point. Li Yunxin frowned slightly. "So you know, Red Madam, although I'm just a Yin spirit with low cultivation, I know something about the general trend. Daotong and Kenzo have lost 5 cultivators with great magical powers, and they were injured by us Yin spirits, so they won't let it go. And Lu Ling died by the Dongting Lake. Daotong will definitely take this as an excuse to launch an attack. If we don't make a plan and take action earlier." Red Madam suddenly frowned and scolded him in a delicate voice. "Why do you care so much?" Hearing her words, Li Yunxin was really stunned. Then he wondered, "Red Madam, you..." The carp monster sighed and closed her eyes slightly, ignoring him. She closed her eyes and ignored him. She seemed to be thinking of something before she opened them again and said in a low voice, "I will take you to see someone." She jumped down from the railing and walked to Li Yunxin with the lantern in her hand. Then she raised the lantern to illuminate his face and looked at him carefully for a while. "Since I can't persuade you, I will take you to see that person. But if you promise me that you will no longer care about the city of Wei and Weishui River, and leave here to be a free ghost cultivator, you still have a chance." "Red Madam, you..." Li Yunxin also looked at her, but he found that this female monster's eyes were moving, as if she wanted to stare at him, but because of some other things, she always wanted to look away. So he smiled in his heart and guessed a possibility. He said, "I will go with you." Red Madam sighed, turned around, and walked a few steps into the lake. A wave came out of the water and supported her. "You come," Red Madam said. But Li Yunxin stared at the wave for a long time, but he didn't move his feet. He frowned. "Is there no other way? Are you going to the water? Or?" Red Madam turned around and smiled, as if she was trying to find joy in the midst of bitterness. "Are you actually afraid of water?" Li Yunxin spread out his hands awkwardly. "Well, I am a little afraid. So is there." But before he finished his words, Red Madam had turned around and rushed to him, holding his arm with both hands. For a moment, the spiritual power in Li Yunxin's body surged and his muscles tightened. He almost flew back and killed her, but Red Madam just hugged his arm, her full breasts pressed against his side, and her cherry lips whispered in his ear, "Then I will take you away." She was a ghost cultivator, so she didn't need to breathe. If she didn't deliberately use magic, her body would be cold. But at this moment, Li Yunxin was caught off guard by her, and his heart was still shaken. He pretended to pull his arm out and said, Red Madam, you have." But Red Madam ignored him. Pulling him along, she leapt up onto the wave platform. Then the sound of the waves and the wind rose in their ears. They were carried by the waves and went straight to the center of the lake. At this time, Li Yunxin really didn't struggle anymore. He just tightly pursed his lips and stared at the jade-like waves under his feet without saying a word. The Dongting was 1,000 miles away. After a quarter of an hour, they got out of the Sanhiku, and the mountains on both sides were gone. At this moment, the Dongting was like a boundless sea, with no end in sight. Only the brilliant Milky Way above their heads cast a cold light, reflecting on the lake. Red Madam didn't speak, just staring at Li Yunxin's side face. Her eyes were sometimes filled with tenderness, sometimes filled with sorrow and guilt, and sometimes filled with apprehension. She just hugged Li Yunxin's arm and clung to it. But she didn't seem to be seducing him, but just satisfying him. What was in her mind? After another quarter of an hour, Red Madam sighed in a low voice. "Li, since you are afraid of water, I won't scare you anymore." After saying that, she waved her hand, and the jade-like waves under her feet turned into a white jade-like boat, carrying them to the lake. Red Madam let go of Li Yunxin's arm, walked to the end of the boat and sat down. She hugged her knees as if she was afraid of the cold and put her chin on them. Then she smiled slightly, and silently watched Li Yunxin take a deep breath, and sit down on the other end of the boat. Then she asked softly, "Li, you just said that I have. You mean that I have been a wife? Do you care about this very much?" Chapter 158. Then she sees the man on the other side of the boat is slightly stunned. He stares straight at her as if he is guessing what she is thinking. Red Lady doesn't say anything. She just slightly tightens her arms. It seems that she can protect herself better in this way, so that people can't see through her. But she still stares at Li Yunxin. After half a day, she heard her husband say in a low voice, "You have refused me. I only think about my brother's revenge now." He glanced at Red Lady, but very quickly avoided her line of sight. Love affair. Who doesn't have love affair? It's not right to think about it now. You still care about it. Red Lady sighs slightly, but her voice soon goes away with the wind. How can anyone know what I want? In fact, what I want is so simple. She turns her eyes away and pats on the side of the boat with one hand. Then the boat stops. At this moment, the two have been rushing into Dongting Lake for 3/4 of an hour. Looking up, there is only the night sky around them. The boat and Dongting seem to be packed in a bucket with the sky as the wall. The sky is engraved with clouds that are silvered by the moonlight. The brilliant sea of stars is inverted over their heads and reflected on Dongting. The sky is boundless, but the boat is lonely. Since the boat stops, the wind and waves also stop. Red Lady stands up and stands at the bow of the boat. She glances at the vast Dongting Lake and says faintly, "Look at this Dongting that is thousands of miles long. For mortals, it is boundless and magnificent. But in my eyes and my father's eyes, it is just a cage. This Dongting has a radius of thousands of miles, almost like an ocean. But my father's real body is thousands of feet long. He shows his real body. But he can't even swim in this Dongting. My father was born in this Dongting. He attained the Tao 3,000 years ago, and was trapped in this lake 2,000 years ago. Although I haven't lived long, I can understand my father's pain. He felt sorry for the marine animals in this lake. He hasn't shown his real body for thousands of years. The sentence you used to say to me the most was, "If I can swim in the vast ocean, I will have no regrets in this life." Li Yunxin remained silent. With both hands supporting himself on the ship's railing, he looked at Red Madam with her back facing him. In the dim light of the night, she looked like a fairy on the lake. He knew one thing in his heart. When humans and demons died, their souls would remain. His soul was incomplete, and he had lost his mind. Even if he were to become a ghostly cultivator in the future, he would still have an obsession. According to his own words, the great general of the Golden Guards of the previous dynasty, the fifth Boyu, when he died, he did not have any attachments in his heart, so he did not have any obsessions. It was just his own wishful thinking. His obsession was definitely there, but neither he nor Li Yunxin had noticed it yet. Red Madam was no exception. She must also have an obsession. Obsession was the greatest weakness of ghostly cultivators. Obsession would cause them to lose their basic judgment when facing many things. Once something related to that obsession appeared, their attention would immediately be drawn to it, and they would become muddle-headed. If it was really possible to die without any worries and obsessions, then why the hell would a human cultivator cultivate longevity? It was better for them to all die and cultivate the divine Tao. Before, Li Yunxin couldn't see Red Madam's obsession. She was too much like an ordinary woman, except for the cruelty shared by some demons. But in Li Yunxin's eyes, this kind of cruelty, a woman lovingly looked at her children playing in the yard, and whispered something to her mother-in-law while cutting off the head of a rooster. Wasn't this as cruel as a demon? Therefore, Red Madam was still very normal. However, now, Li Yunxin thinks that he gradually knows where her obsession is. Therefore, he just listens to the woman and read quietly in the sound of water, and above the Dongting in the night. Do you know how I offended your friend? Red Madam turns around and smiles slightly. Before that, I was just a red carp who achieved the Tao. My mother was a human, but I was born with the inheritance of my father. I was born with a monster body of the emptiness realm. In this Dongting, no one dares to disobey me. Although I am useless, I also know how powerful Dragon Sun is. He is a big demon who is close to the true realm, and he has a dragon body. How could I go to Weishui River to provoke him? And even if I want to go to Weishui River, I can't get out. My father was imprisoned in Dongting. I have his bloodline, so I was also imprisoned. So I said that this big Dongting is just a cage. Li Yunxin thinks for a while and asks softly, "Who has such a great ability?" "I can't tell you now." Red Madam smiles slightly. She looks at Li Yunxin more and more softly. She is completely different from the woman 2 days ago. Therefore, in fact, it was my father who asked me to provoke Dragon Sun deliberately. On the other hand, I've stayed in Dongting for 200 years, and I can't even leave the lakeside. I really want to take a look at Egret Town, and see if those fellows called humans are really alive like in the stories my father told me. So my personal ability was abolished by Dragon Sun, and I became a red carp. I suffered a little, but I finally became a ghost cultivator. I didn't know if I could really bypass the inhibition by doing this, but now it seems that I have succeeded. When I become a ghost cultivator, I can leave Dongting, go to the Egret Town, and do something for my father. Red Madam smiles and looks at Li Yunxin. But you should know that we ghost cultivators all have obsessions. My obsessions are the revenge of your brother. Or in other words, the obsessions are love. And my obsessions. Speaking of this, Red Madam slowly sits down. She kicks a pair of embroidered shoes into the water with just a kick. A pair of snow-white and smooth feet dip into the lake and stir gently. The water rippled outwards. Red Madam stares at the water for a while. She puts her hands on the side of the boat, leans back slightly, and turns to look at Li Yunxin. When I was a demon, I often listened to a person reading by the lake. I listened to the sound of his reading. The sound of reading is very pleasant to hear. Li Yunxin, Did you study before you died? Li Yunxin's eyes and voice are gentle. He smiles lightly. My parents died and my family was poor. I only studied elementary school and the meaning of words before I died. I never read classics and history. I can't understand what you said, but it's very pleasant to hear. Red Madam smiles slightly. In the past, Du Xing also said some pleasant words that I didn't understand, but now he doesn't remember. He is a mortal after all. After becoming a ghost, he is more confused. Then, Li Yunxin, can you write poems? Li Yunxin shakes his head and smiles. I can copy poems. Red Madam blinks happily. At least at this time, she looks like a real beautiful girl. Li Yunxin, copy one for me. Okay. Li Yunxin closes his eyes and takes a deep breath of the dense water vapor above Dongting. Then he murmurs. The west wind blows the old Dongting waves. One night Xiangjuan has many white hairs. After getting drunk, I don't know, the sky is still water. A boat full of clear dreams covers the Milky Way. He reads this poem in ancient rhyme, long and sad. After reading this poem, Red Madam doesn't speak. She stares at the water and then closes her eyes again. After a long silence, she turns her head and smiles at Li Yunxin. It's really nice. Li Yunxin, who is Xiangjuan? Li Yunxin smiles gently and knocks his palm with the folding fan in his hand. Look at my fan. I bought it from a street shop in the city of Wei. Are there spots on the bone like tears? Red Madam stares at it carefully with her beautiful eyes and says yes. So the bone of the fan is made of tear bamboo. It is said that a long time ago, there was a human emperor called Emperor Shun. There was also a river called Xiangjiang River. There was a monster in Xiangjiang River who often harmed people. So Emperor Shun went to Xiangjiang River to kill the monster. His 2 wives waited for him for a long time, but he didn't come back. So they went to Xiangjiang River to find him. But they found out that after Emperor Shun killed the monster, he also died. Emperor Shun's 2 wives cried bitterly, and their tears splashed on the bamboo, forming this tear bamboo. And Heaven Emperor remembered Emperor Shun's merits, and conferred him the title of Xiangjiang River God, Xiangjuan. Ah, my father is Lord Dongting. Red Madam sighs. Then Li Yunxin, do you want to be the Wei River God? Li Yunxin's eyelashes tremble slightly. The moment he heard the last sentence, dozens of thoughts flashed through his mind. He quickly grabbed a few, but let go of all of them. Finally, he exhales lightly and smiles calmly. I have never thought that far. Red Madam is silent for a while and also smiles. So I like to listen to people reading poems. After listening to it for a long time, I can understand some things. For example, when I knew that Li Yunxin was reading this poem, I was not happy at all and felt a lot of emotions. My father felt that he owed me and wanted to make it up to me. I love that world. I love the way men and women are together. So my father wanted Du Sheng to accompany me. Red Madam looks at the ripples in the lake. I used to listen to people reading by the lake. It was him. But he has completely changed. He is muddle-headed and only says one sentence all day long. Li Yunxin is more beautiful than him and speaks more eloquently than him. The first time I saw Li Yunxin, actually, I liked him. Red Madam looks at Li Yunxin again, her eyes calm and clear. And Li Yunxin also looks at her. But, Red Madam, a few days ago, because at that time, although I loved you, I could not bear to see you suffer, and I was afraid that my father would not allow me. Red Madam looks at him. But now my father told me that since I like him, there is no harm in accepting him. Oh, my obsession. But, Li Yunxin sighs in his heart. He knows this Red Madam's obsession. I want someone to love me well. Red Madam's long eyelashes are slightly lowered, and she says softly, I told you before that it is not too late to be a free ghost cultivator. Now, I tell you again, my father is imprisoned in Dongting Lake, and he can't get out. You want my father to go to the city of Wei to avenge your friend, but it is impossible. You can only wait for a long time. Maybe there will be a chance. Now that you know this, I ask you again, are you still not leaving? Li Yunxin is silent for a while. No, he doesn't leave, because he wants to confirm something or someone. He also thinks this is a good opportunity to understand Lord Dongting. If Red Madam really takes him to Lord Dongting's lair, He would then be able to know more and lay out his plans even more meticulously. Lord Dongting may be a great demon, but he is not a ghost cultivator Li Yunxin, with a low realm. These days the dragon cult has been quite powerful. Plus, he caused the ninth heaven thunder and fire in the battle in the city of Wei the night before. People in the city of Wei remember the storm caused by the ninth young master in the city of Wei, and they all say, Wei River Dragon King showed his divinity again. Therefore, he has broken through the emptiness realm and returned to the transcendent realm. As long as Lord Dongting can't see through him for a while, even if he is on guard against him and doesn't use his full strength, he can protect himself and escape at any time. So don't leave. Red Madam seems to know that he will answer like this. She stares at him for a while, and suddenly her eyes are covered with a layer of mist. You are so determined. A smile bloomed on her lips. You love me too. You are so different. Li Yunxin sighs slightly. He knew that Hong Yangzi's obsession had taken over her mind. But before he could think about the deeper meaning behind the sentence, you guys are so different, he saw Red Lady suddenly raise her hand under the moonlight, revealing her snow-white and smooth forearm. Then, her slender fingers dance gently like water waves. Her voice is clear and graceful, and she murmurs a strange song. A gentleman does not know the time when he will serve. The sun is setting. Muyin roars. She sings these 4 lines 3 times. Then she turns her head and whispers to Li Yunxin with a smile. Li Shi is here. So the Dongting Lake, it is boiling. Clouds. Big groups of clouds. Big groups of snow white. Thick clouds rise from the water not far from them. They are like thick fog, and also like clouds of smoke. Every time a bubble rises from the bottom of the water and bursts on the surface of the water, a cloud of white gas is released. Then the cloud slowly rises and stays in the air for dozens of meters, and is silvered by the moonlight. Suddenly, it becomes a dreamy fairy tale-like world. It seems that the sky above their heads is full of big cotton candy. And then, some white 4-legged animals rise from the water. When those white animals come to the water seems to become hard ground. Hundreds of these animals are slowly walking back and forth in the water in front of them, and the clouds floating in the sky are slowly rising from their heads. Li Yunxin gently takes a breath and gently exhales. At a distance of 100 meters, ordinary people can't see it clearly, but he can see it clearly. Those animals are people. Hundreds of fair and plump people, naked, walked slowly on the surface of the water on all 4s. White mist rises from their eyes, ears, mouths, and noses, and finally converges into those clouds in the air. Those clouds, they are Yangqi in essence. Red Madam slightly squints, looking at the scene in the moonlight, and sighs in a low voice. When I was young, I had troubles in my heart, so I came to see Muyin. It is said that immortals eat wind and drink dew, and demons also like it. But wind dew tastes bland and plain, while human yang is sweet and rich. When the moon is full, they come out of the white forest to Muyin. After a month they can harvest. Chapter 159. Red Lady stared at the distance for a while, as if she was an ordinary girl looking at a beautiful scenery. Then she turned her head and smiled. But you used to be a human. I think you don't like it. Li Yunxin smiled. Yes, I don't like it. But I brought you here to see another person. After saying this, Red Lady put her arms on the side of the white jade boat. Then she floated up and landed in Li Yunxin's arms. Li Yunxin grabbed the side of the boat with both hands, as if he wanted to hug her. Red Lady went straight into his arms, but didn't do anything else. She gently stretched out her jade-like arms, with one hand wrapped around Li Yunxin's back, and the other placed on his chest. Then, she gently placed her head on his chest and gently said, I brought Li Lang to see. That Lu Ling like a kitten. Red Lady obediently curled up in his bosom. Li Yunxin was stunned for a while, and kept silent for a while. He knew that 2 days ago this Red Madam told him that she was married and refused him because of her obsession. What she was doing now was also because of her obsession. Just a single thought could cause so much trouble. And she said, to bring him to see Lu Ling. Li Yunxin finally breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. The first time he met Song Yunzi in Mount June, he only said something big had happened. The body of Lu Ling stopped at the station of the Shangqing Danding sect in the city of Wei. He didn't guard it well, and waited for the people from the Langya cave to come. Instead, he came to Mount June, and said something big had happened. What big thing could it be? Then he met Red Lady for the first time, and heard her say that the concubine married by the monarch's father was troublesome. Now the Taoists in the city of Wei are not willing to leave. He already had a vague inference, and now this inference was finally confirmed. In his bosom, Red Madam gently rubbed her face against his body, closed her eyes, and greedily inhaled a breath of Li Yunqin's breath. Then she raised her hand and pointed to the distance. Look at the one standing in the crowd. Li Yunqin immediately looked over. Previously, he couldn't see it clearly because he was shocked by the scene. Secondly, it was because the clouds rising from the 7 apertures of those animals had covered the figure. A figure dressed in white. That was Ling Kongzi, the head disciple of Langya Utopia's master. Li Yunqin let out a deep sigh. Red Madam hugged him tightly, and stretched out her hand to pat the side of the ship. Thus, the white jade boat glided smoothly and silently. In the blink of an eye, it was only a few steps away from Ling Kongzi. Li Yunqin saw her clearly. Ling Kongzi. Her appearance had not changed, she was still shockingly beautiful. Even without any makeup on her face, with only the moonlight as a foundation, she still had a soul-stirring beauty. He was dressed in a plain white robe. There was a bell hanging on his left wrist, and a thin whip in his right hand. Their eyes met. Li Yunqin's eyes were clear and calm, while Ling Kongzi was slightly stunned, and then a surprised expression slowly appeared on her face. Then she blinked and slowly turned around. She first raised her left hand that was tied with the bell, and pointed at Li Yunqin. After 2 breaths of time she murmured, "You didn't die?" Like in slow motion. It was as if her movements were half a beat slower than her thoughts, or like a mechanical puppet that could not operate smoothly. And Red Lady, like a lazy woman who had just woken up in the morning, slightly closed her eyes and gently rubbed her head in Li Yunqin's arms. Then she said in a low voice, "Right now, Lu Ling is between life and death. His snow mountain and Qi Sea have collapsed, and his cultivation has been abolished. Normally he should be dead, and his soul should leave his body. Unfortunately, there is a treasure on her wrist, the soul-suppressing bell, which took her soul away. Right now, the soul is controlling the body through the bell. Speaking of which, if my father hadn't found this treasure and attached it to his body, this Lu Ling would have become a ghost cultivator. But now, he's not as agile as a mortal in the secular world." Li Yunqin quietly listened to Red Lady's words and calmly said, "So you asked her to come to Mu Yin?" At first she was arrogant, but she was always a smart person. My father said that taking her as a concubine was also willful, just to humiliate her. In fact, she couldn't bear the torment now. She would really die. Red Lady lazily opened one eye and glanced at Lu Ling for a while. "But I know what she's plotting. She's thinking that maybe someone from Daotong will come and save her," Li Yunqin said. At this time, Lu Ling slowly opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say the second sentence. Li Yunqin looked at her and said, "Of course, I'm not dead, and we still have a good account to settle. What did I say to you in Chonghua Building that day? If you still remember, you should know that I'm a person who will seek revenge for hatred. I will pay you back double." Lu Ling slowly blinked and slowly put down her hand. If her memory was not damaged, she should remember that in Chonghua Building that night, Li Yunqin deliberately shook her mind and wanted to capture her heart. But she was arrogant and didn't completely surrender. At this moment, Li Yunqin said it in such a furious tone. Any smart person would know that he was implicitly saying, "I will find a way to save you from this suffering." Lu Ling was a smart person, but now she was a weak, slow but still strong-willed smart person. Of course, there were many things she didn't figure out, but it didn't prevent her from recognizing one fact. At least for her at this moment, Li Yunqin was more reliable than anyone else in Dongting. Therefore she slowly put down her hand and glared at Li Yunqin. "The Tao of Nature is clear. When all the masters in my cave come out, all of you. It seemed that Lu Ling felt that it was too slow and embarrassing to talk like this, so she simply stopped talking or moving. She just closed her eyes and stood there straight, slightly raising her head. Li Yunqin breathed a sigh of relief. At least for now, she hasn't been exposed. However, whether or not he should save Lu Ling would depend on how the situation changed. Now the situation in the city of Wei is treacherous. Her fate is no longer in the hands of anyone. However, at this time, Hong Nyangzi suddenly reached out and patted on the side of the boat again. The boat sped away from the sheep again. Li Yunqin slightly frowned. Hong Nyangzi, you have taken me to see her. What do you plan to do next? Now you should know that Ling Kongzi is not dead. Red Madam interrupted his words. Then you should also know that if Dao Tong really comes looking for us, first, my Juanfu is not afraid of them, and second, he still has this Ling Kongzi in his hands. Return Ling Kongzi to Dao Tong, and that will be a contribution to the protection of the heavenly abode's disciple. Red Lady paused for a moment before she caressed Li Yunqin's chest. You and that person are really different. This is the second time you've mentioned that man. Are you talking about Du Shangor? The ninth young master. Red Madam finally sat up and reluctantly left Li Yunqin. She slightly raised her head and looked at him. You are so close to him, but you are completely different. She stretched out her hand and used her cold fingertips to brush past Li Yunqin's cheek. You speak gently, smile gently, and recite poems beautifully. You are also good-looking. I have never seen such a good-looking person like you in White Heron Continent. You are even more good-looking than the ninth young master. She smiled again. Even though I know you are lying to me, I still can't help but admire you. Li Yunqin slightly narrowed his eyes. Lie to you? Red Madam stood up and looked at Li Yunqin. She slowly retreated to the bow of the white jade ship. The tenderness on her face slowly faded. She only looked at him, as if she knew him but didn't know him. I once heard from Du Sheng that there are many good women in the world, but they like fickle men. At that time, I also thought, why is that? But later I knew, that fickle man, although his heart is fickle, and he makes promises lightly, he is gentle, considerate, and attentive to every woman. He is so good. Even if I know it is just a momentary happiness, I can't help but cherish it. What do the women in this world love? They love only this tenderness and sweetness. With this tenderness and sweetness, what's the use of being a moth darting into the fire? Red Madam sighed again in a low voice. My father has to avenge the ninth young master. But he has been imprisoned for 2,000 years. He is not in a hurry. In his opinion, Dao Tong is a big mountain that can't be moved easily. So what if he killed Ling Kongzi and that Taoist in the city? Dao Tong will kill all the Yin gods in the world sooner or later. Sooner or later, he will have the chance to avenge. If he wants to kill, he will kill Bai Yunqin first. So my dear, you asked him to avenge Long Jiu now, but you are thinking too much. And if you want to be the Lord of Wei River, or the Lord Dongting, you are thinking too much. My father is imprisoned in this Dongting. In fact, he is also stationed in this Dongting. There is a big secret under this 1,000-mile Dongting that you all don't know. No matter what you do, my father will never leave here. Her words made Li Yunqin's brows furrow even tighter, until he heard Red Madam say, So you think that Dongting and Wei River used to be the waters under the jurisdiction of your ninth brother, and that it is a safe place? You are wrong. Now this place is the most dangerous place in the world. A string is plucked in Li Yunqin's heart, making a clanging sound. He realizes where the problem is. This Red Madam now seems to think that he is the hatred who was defeated in the battle, extremely weak, and fled here. He finally understands what the sentence, "You are really different from him," means. And he also understands why she asked him if he wanted to be the Lord of Wei River before. Although the inference is wrong. But, what a smart Red Madam. Li Yunqin's face suddenly changes. He immediately sits up straight on the boat and looks at her seriously. You know? How do you know? Red Madam raises her head slightly and looks at him. She suddenly smiles. I also love your mighty appearance now. I know this. Well, it's because you attracted the ninth heaven thunder fire. You killed the Taoist priest, but you didn't know that I have spies in the city and saw you. My father and I know what happened in the Li Kingdom. Besides, I led you to this Dongting lake. Under the lake, there is a way to distinguish the dragon aura on you. It is Dragon Sun. Only Dragon Sun has the aura. But this is also the secret of Dongting. You don't know it, but you are not ignorant. But I didn't expect that you are so badly hurt. Red Madam slowly steps forward and stretches out her hand to Li Yunxin. She smiles, then my dear. Without waiting for her to finish her sentence, Li Yunxin immediately leaped up and flew in the direction from which she had just come. His only miscalculation is that he didn't think of the so-called method in Dongting Lake that Red Madam said. He has many ways to deal with, and even get information when the other party is ambiguous. However, once a big demon like Lord Dongting proves his identity in a way that he believes in, he can't be persuaded by words. Damn it! He underestimates this big demon, who has been in Dongting for 3,000 years. Just when he used his magical power to escape, and Red Lady arrived on the white jade boat, the water of Dongting Lake suddenly turned black. It is dark in the night, but at least under the moonlight, it is as black jade. However, at this moment, the water becomes like a pool of thick ink. There is a huge monster under the water. Li Yunxin doesn't know whether it is Lord Dongting or not, but he knows that he can't win if he fights with the big demon in Dongting Lake. Therefore, he activates all his Wakan and flees a few miles away in one breath. He can see the wooden pavilion by Dongting. However, when he is about to land on the shore, Red Madam's white jade boat is a magic weapon. It is even faster than him. It catches up with him. Red Madam shouts at him in the roaring wind. You! Li Yunxin won't give her a chance to finish her words. He just hits the ghost cultivator's chest with his palm. Of course, he can try to kill her, but that will block his momentum. Besides, he wants to seriously injure her and send her flying. Her father loves her so much that he will definitely block his momentum to land and hide 10 feet away from Dongting. With a muffled bang, Red Madam immediately flies back like a kite with a broken string. With the force of this blow, Li Yunxin is finally 10 feet away from Dongting with the wind and clouds. He turns around and looks back. However, he sees a giant palm made of water suddenly appears on the lake's surface. It hits Red Madam and sends her flying again. He hears a muffled shout. You unfilial son! Li Yunxin's eyes widen, and then he is stunned in place. Red Madam's body falls at his feet with a bang. Her clothes are broken and her hair is messy. Dark golden blood oozes out of her mouth and nose. It drips on the ground and evaporates like water drops on a red soldering iron. Li Yunxin's eyelashes tremble slightly. After this blow, the giant palm made of water disintegrates and falls back into the lake. The huge shadow under the water also disappears. He looks at Dongting Lake, and then at Red Madam on the ground. He takes a step back subconsciously. You. After a long time he says, you. He doesn't help her up, so Red Madam just lies quietly on the ground. The night is as dark as ink, and the wind in the pines is whispering. Only after a quarter of an hour did Red Madam move slightly. She coughs a few times, and then slowly props herself up from the ground. She raises her hand to wipe the corner of her mouth, and looks at Li Yunxin again. Looking at his silly, surprised and hesitant look, she smiles. My dear, you are so cruel. I just want to tell you to go away. And don't come back. Why? Li Yunxin takes another step back, puts his hands behind his back, and clenches them tightly. Why did you take me to the lake tonight? Red Madam stands up slowly. She doesn't speak, but looks at Dongting Lake behind her with narrowed eyes. Then she slowly walks to the wooden pavilion a few steps away, and sits on the railing again. She looks at Li Yunxin and whispers, because I love you. After saying this, she seems to find it very interesting. She laughs again, and splashes a few drops of pale golden blood. My father, he wants to take you away. Although I don't know what he will do after taking you. I know it won't be a good thing. As for me, I come to ask you, my dear, would you like to go back to Dongting with me? You said yes. She looks at Li Yunxin, and says with a smile like a girl recalling sweet things. I also said that my father may not avenge you immediately. But even so, my dear, would you like to go back to Dongting for me? You said yes. She stops and remains silent for a while. Although I know you are coaxing me, but I am still happy in my heart. I was more happy to stay with you on the boat for a while. In fact, I want to tell you those things so that you can be on guard. It's just that my monarch father came too early. My dear, you are too impatient. Li Yunxin tightens his lips and looks at her. Red Lady also looks at him. After watching for a while, she shakes her head slightly. I know you don't love me. But since you don't love me, why did you tease me that day? A girl's heart is fragile, Li Lang. Not as fragile as your heart of stone. After saying this, she becomes silent again. Li Yunxin is also silent. Finally, a small fish jumps out of the water and falls back into the water. Red Lady stands up and slowly walks to the Dongting. If you want to go somewhere else, you can go. If not, my father won't try again since he didn't catch you this time. He once said, if you could do something in the city of Wei, such as killing that Taoist priest, it would be a relief for him. Then, when the time comes, there's no harm in talking about something else. Red Lady slowly steps into the water and turns to smile at Li Yunxin under the moonlight. I really hope I can see that day. Li Yunxin suddenly raises his head and steps forward asking, what does really hope mean? But why do you want to help me? Red Madam smiled sadly. Li Lang, there are some things. There are not so many schemes and schemes. In this world, there is really pure love, even if it is just a temporary temper. Hey, you heartless lover. The west wind blows the old Dongting waves. One night my hair turns white. After getting drunk, I don't know, the sky is in the water. The boat is full of clear dreams. The Milky Way. You must write this poem for me. Remember me. After saying this, she leans up and falls straight into the water. The turbid waves of the Dongting Lake suddenly surges and swallows her in a moment. Li Yunxin frowns and looks at all this, then he waits. But this time, nothing happens. He waits until the dawn, and the morning light first appears. He waits until it gets dark, and the moon rises in the west. Then he looks around blankly and murmurs to himself, this is... what trick? Chapter 160. When the bright moon hung high above the yellow pine tree by the cliff, the last believer who came to the mountain to pay his respects finally left. Lu Laodao carefully inspected the main hall of the mountain god temple, then locked the door. There were no valuable things in the hall, only some clay statues. These statues could be made by the clay craftsmen of Egret Island, and it would only cost a dime of silver to make one. But he knew that these clay statues were not just clay statues, they had spirits. He knew about these spirits, and he had dealt with them before. However, humans and demons were different, and he felt that he should not get too involved. In fact, it was not that he had any special opinion of demons. There were not many good ones among them. What special opinion could he have? It was just that he had been a temple attendant for so many years, and he knew a lot of things. He knew that some demons could use their supernatural powers and do good deeds. However, it was hard to get rid of one's nature. You could not tell when they would suddenly do strange things that made people's hearts jump. But these few, well, the blue dragon envoy, the white dragon envoy, the black dragon envoy, the red dragon envoy, and that strange dragon prince, and the soul of the Qiao family's child were different. Lu Laodao once overheard them preaching in the hall when he got up at night. That dragon prince talked about 3 views to the 4 demons. Lu Laodao listened for a while, until his hair was wet from the night dew. Then he went back to his room. In the middle of the next night, he could not help but eavesdrop outside the room. Halfway through, there was suddenly no more movement in the hall. After a while he heard the strange dragon prince say, that old guy outside the room. Oh no, not old guy, oh, my dragon cult sect leader elder? Hee, what are you eavesdropping on? I am teaching on behalf of the cult leader. Lao Dao knew that he was discovered, so he sighed and pushed the door open. He told the dragon prince, who was attached to the golden statue, that he couldn't see clearly. 3 views are not something that you can say. It's not something like, if you believe in the dragon cult, you must build 3 Taoist temples when you establish your own sect. Instead, it referred to, outlook on life, worldview and values, these 3 things. As he said this, he remembered the past. Actually, it hadn't been that long. Only a month had passed. But it felt like it had happened yesterday. He thought of Brother Xian in the courtyard of the Dragon King Temple. slowly drinking under the thin bamboo, while talking to him about the water cloud force. From time to time, she would say a few words that he couldn't quite understand, and then she would laugh. When Lao Dao thought of this, he stood in the hall and sighed. Then he realized that the hall had quietened down. His heart tightened as he thought, Aya, how could I be so muddle-headed? These are demons after all, and I have angered them. Unexpectedly, after a breath's time, that dragon prince suddenly cried out, saying, Aya, you're right. Aya, the cult leader really said that night, and so on. Then, he forced himself to talk for the whole night. What else could he talk about? Although he knew that Li Yunxin had taught these demons, he didn't know to what extent. According to the rules, after he received Li Yunxin's water cloud force, without permission, he couldn't teach it to anyone else. He didn't even teach it to Shirkuizi. So he picked up some of the things that happened when they were together in the past. And those demons listened attentively. Gradually, he felt that these demons didn't seem to be that afraid of people anymore. However, when he slept the next day, he felt a lingering fear. Could it be that those demons had used some kind of innate ability to bewitch his mind? Then in a daze he felt unhappy. When Brother Xian was alive, he always had a lot of courage in his heart. Even when he saw that big demon, he wasn't afraid. Now that he wasn't here, although he heard that the child he reincarnated created this dragon cult, but still Lu Laodao sighed. He walked into the house under the moonlight. The light in Shirkuizi's room was still on, which was a habit these days. Only after he cleaned the courtyard and went back to the house and turned off the light did the woman turn off the light and go to sleep. When he walked out of the house, he coughed lightly. This was also a habit. He told the woman that he was going to sleep. Then Lu Laodao pushed the door open, turned around and closed it. This house wasn't like the Dragon King temple he lived in the city of Wei. The walls were made of yellow earth. After he came, Shirkuizi used toilet paper to frame the walls. But when he lit a fire outside to cook, the toilet paper would smell burnt. However, this smell didn't annoy Lu Laodao, except that it was a little choking. On the contrary, he felt very comfortable. It was a fire. There was a woman making a fire to cook, so the burnt smell was a little like home. He felt that he would probably slowly settle down on Nanshan Hill. Slowly he turned around. There was no light in the house, and the paper on the window was not very transparent. Therefore, after he came in, it took a while for his eyes to adjust to the light in the house. Then he could see a person sitting by the rough wooden table at the end of the Kong, bathed in the moonlight. Lu Laodao sighed softly, as if he was afraid that his heavy breathing would startle that person, so he disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then he heard that person say with a familiar voice, I know that you have broken through the conception realm and reached the emptiness realm. You can't cultivate by yourself when you reach the emptiness realm. Without someone to guide you, it is easy to make mistakes. I thought about it, and came. Lu Laodao gasped a few times, feeling that his breath was slightly hot and trembling. He looked around in panic, wanting to reach out to prepare something. But he felt that there was nothing he could do. After thinking for a while, he remembered that there was half a pot of cold tea on the wooden table next to that person. But it wasn't any good tea. After drinking it, his mouth was full of foam. After panicking for a while, he suddenly calmed down. He let out a long sigh and said, Brother Xian is right. But when I reached the emptiness realm, I always felt that the snow mountain was unstable, and the sea of Qi was in a mess, so I didn't dare to continue cultivating. As he spoke, he slowly walked to the opposite side of that person, pulled a lame stool over and sat on it, so that he could see the person's face more clearly. That was really Brother Xian, a living person. He sat leisurely on the rattan chair, leaning against the back with his arms resting on the armrests. He didn't look at himself, but tilted his head to look at the window. The window paper was originally a little yellow, but under the moonlight, it became bright white. He stared at the bright white window paper. He looked calm, but Lu Laodao saw that he was squinting slightly. The shadows cast by his eyelashes on his face would occasionally tremble slightly. His lips were also pursed, just like how he used to be. It seemed that in the next moment, some faint, playful, and surprising words would come out. This was Brother Xian. Lu Laodao let out a sigh of relief and said, "A few days ago, when I circulated the qi to the third level of the water cloud force and reached the Han Xiaoyang, I felt uncomfortable in my chest. I didn't care and continued to circulate the qi. Unexpectedly, after another 15 minutes, Qingling Yuan, Jiaosuan, Airmen, and Si Zhukong all felt that something was wrong. I almost lost my breath." "What time was it?" Li Yunxin didn't move and only asked indifferently. "Just past the hour of the night. I thought the next hour would be the meeting of dragons and tigers." "The time is wrong." Li Yunxin sighed slightly, still staring at the window paper. "Usually, the hour of the night is correct. But the position of the South Mountain, the solar terms, the hour of the night a few days ago belonged to the Western Earth, so of course you would make a mistake. But you haven't touched that Shirquizi these days? Otherwise, you wouldn't have gone astray with the balance of yin and yang." Lu Laodao blushed and said embarrassedly, "Well, how can that be?" At this time, Li Yunxin turned around and looked at Lu Laodao, finally smiling. "You thought I was dead. Now that you see me again, why aren't you excited at all? It's so sad." Lu Laodao didn't say anything. After a moment of silence, he also smiled. "I know Brother Xian doesn't like that kind of tone. If I were to cry and say, 'You're not dead and what happened these days?' Brother Xian would feel annoyed and embarrassed. Maybe he would immediately run away and only return after 2 or 3 days." Li Yunxin smiled and sighed. "It's still more comfortable talking to you. Ai old Lu, I've missed you these days." The two of them sat facing each other for a while. Li Yunxin sat up straight on the rattan chair and was lost in thought again. Lu Laodao didn't know what he was thinking about. He sat with him for a while and saw that Lu Laodao didn't want to say anything. He quietly got up, took the teapot from the table, pushed the door open and went out. After a while, there were faint sounds of people talking, cups clinking, and firewood being carried from outside the room. Then slowly, the smell of burning toilet paper wafted into the room. After a quarter of an hour, Lu Laodao pushed the door open again and came in. There was a wooden tray in his hand, a pot of tea, and a pile of dried sweet potatoes on the tray. He gently placed the wooden tray on the table next to Li Yunxin and sat opposite him. He said, "There's nothing good. Brother Xian, fill your stomach first." Li Yunxin softly responded. Then he let out a long sigh. "Let's get down to business, old Lu. Let me ask you first. Since you know that I'm not dead, and you've reached the emptiness realm, do you want to do great things with me?" Li Yunxin's sudden excitement surprised Lu Laodao slightly. But he also noticed that when Teng Qingshan said this, his eyes drifted outside the door and stopped on the dried sweet potatoes for a while. However, he didn't think too much about it, because what Teng Qingshan said required him to think carefully. But he only thought carefully for a moment. Then he said, "Yes." Li Yunxin looked at him seriously and said, "I'm not a human anymore. I'm now the body of Dragon Sun Qiwen. In other words, I'm a demon." Lu Laodao let out a sigh of relief. "Isn't it better? What's the fun of being a human? And you have to know that there's a 3,000-year big demon in the Dongting Lake. There's a Taoist priest in the city of Wei. That big demon is not a friend, and that Taoist priest is an enemy. Moreover, it was I who schemed to kill that 9th young master in Ling Kongzi. When I raised my eyes and looked around, there were strong enemies everywhere." Lu Laodao smiled. "Brother Xian, I'm not the Hunyuanzi anymore. Now my real name is Lu Gongzan." Li Yunxin was silent for a while and said, "So before I even treated you as a chess piece. Now I ask you if you want to do great things with me. I want to turn you from a hidden chess piece to an open chess piece. You'll return to the city of Wei and face many people and things. The Taoist priest in the realm of Wei will take action. Maybe soon, there will be helpers. You'll become my signboard. You'll attract many people's attention and bear great risks. I like to scheme. But schemes may not succeed every time. Once I'm wrong, you may die. You'll die for real. You can't become a ghost cultivator." Lu Laodao smiled. "Will it be glorious and imposing when you return to the city of Wei?" Li Yunxin was silent for a while and laughed. "You'll return to the city of Wei as the hierarch of the dragon cult. And I've made a lot of arrangements in the city of Wei. When you return, There will be gongs and drums, children clearing the way, and believers kneeling to worship you. It'll be glorious and imposing. Lu Gongzan spread out his hands. Then what else can I say? A real man is born in this world. Isn't it to be majestic and imposing? Okay, then, let me tell you about the current situation of Wei River and city of Wei. Li Yunqin took a deep breath and began to tell Lu Laodao in a calm tone about the earth-shattering things in the cultivation world these days, but not known by mortals. So he talked for a full hour. After he finished, Lu Laodao blinked his eyes and sighed, such a world. But the ghost emperor? He frowned slightly. The emperor of the Li kingdom indeed has many people, but there are other people or things such as, alas, such as the dragon's son hatred mentioned by Brother Xian. Hundreds of millions of people in the Li kingdom know the emperor of the Li kingdom, and they also know hatred. According to Lao Dao, I think there are more people who know hatred. After all, although the world is big, Brother Xian, you said that the Tulahan kingdom in the far west and the Quan kingdom in the far south would take more than 10 years to reach the capital of the Li kingdom on horseback. Such a long distance. Maybe the people there don't know when the dead Emperor Li came to the throne, and they think that it is the previous Emperor Li who is managing the Li kingdom. But whether it is the Tulahan kingdom or the Quan kingdom, the people there all know the divine dragon, dragon son and hatred, right? So, hatred obviously has more followers than the Emperor Li. But why is he not as strong as the Emperor Li? Or, in this Jianghu, there are some famous people. The people who know them are no less than the people who know the emperor. But why are those people not as strong as the emperor? This is a good question, old Lu. Li Yunqin breathed a sigh of relief. No one told me about these things. But now that I have the body of Yin spirit, I am Qi Wen, and there are many people who know about this. I am afraid that the people who know about Qi Wen are more than the people who know about the Emperor Li. Why am I not as strong as him? I have experienced and thought about it for a long time, and I vaguely understand some of the rules. For example, old Lu, you do not have to worry about food and clothing, and you worship a god at home. When you have nothing to do, you go to him and pray for peace in your home. You believe in him and respect him, and you give him the power of faith every day. But he has never shown his divinity in front of you, although you believe in his existence. Just like the common people in this world, how can there be anyone who truly believes in him? What they saw was something that could be seen, something that could be touched. They know that the officials in the city are people, and they know the emperor. Although the emperor is unreachable, they also know that he is a person. He is a real person like himself. Every day, he lives in the emperor's territory, obeys the emperor's laws, is controlled by the officials sent by the emperor, and has to pay taxes for the emperor. These are all real, inextricably linked things. People know that it is true, and they know that the emperor is there. They believe that the emperor is there. If someone jumps out and says, well, maybe the emperor doesn't exist, then what if the emperor's laws don't work? People will laugh at him for being crazy. But those gods, the gods that you worship in your home, if someone says, well, maybe the god you worship is not there at all, maybe he doesn't hear you, and he won't show his divinity. What are the reactions of ordinary people? I also know that he may not really show his divinity. I just want to be at ease. Right? You have been a temple attendant for so many years, you must have heard this kind of thing a lot. So for me, there are also two kinds of faith: strong faith and weak faith. You worship the god in your home. This is weak faith. You feel that he should be there, but you are not very sure, and you are not sure that he will show his divinity in your home. The people in the world know that hatred is there. They scare the child when he cries. If you cry again, hatred will come and take you away. Even if you say that, who would really believe that hatred will come from the world and take the child away? This is still weak faith. Those who know me Chiwen, those who know Wei River Dragon King, well, they know that there is a temple here. But do they talk about it normally? Only when the weather is dry or hot will they sigh and say, oh my, why doesn't it rain, Lord Dragon King? Forget it. Continue watering the vegetable garden. This is still weak faith. As for the emperor, you have committed a crime today, and you have been caught and beaten. You have violated the emperor's laws. That is when you know that you have angered the emperor, violated the rules, and are beaten. This kind of faith is many, many times stronger than the faith in your God, the faith in hatred, and the faith in me Chiwen. This, I call it strong faith. Think about it later. So many people believe so strongly in the existence of the emperor of the Li Kingdom. So many people believe that the Li Kingdom is the largest and strongest empire in the world. Since Emperor Li can rule such a huge empire, then Emperor Li is also mighty and imposing. Then, Emperor Li died. You go and tell an ordinary citizen that Emperor Li is dead. The citizen will say, "Oh my, Emperor Li is actually dead. Such a powerful emperor is actually dead." He will think about more things. If he is a citizen of the empire, then he will panic, be surprised and worry. Will the world be in chaos after the emperor is dead? If there is chaos, the most unlucky people are the citizens. How good it would be if the emperor is not dead. There will even be people who sincerely, spontaneously, mourn and cry for Emperor Li from the bottom of their hearts. This kind of faith is already far more than strong faith. This is a kind of explosive super strong faith. Hundreds of millions of people, this kind of super strong faith, almost in a few days, added to the ghost of Emperor Li. The ghost emperor created in this way of course is strong. Chapter 161. After Li Yunqin said this, he narrowed his eyes slightly. As for why that black Bai Yanjun didn't take Emperor Li's soul away in time, this is the strangest thing. What he said was something that Lu Laodao had never thought of. But Lu Laodao was not a stupid person after all. After listening to him, and thinking about it carefully, he understood. After thinking about it, he asked again, "But if that's the case, why don't you show your divinity?" Li Yunqin knew what he meant. He raised his eyebrows, poured a cup of lukewarm tea and took a sip, then looked at Lu Laodao. Because there are those stinky Taoist priests and stinky swordsmen. The people of Daotong and Kenzo, those low-level disciples, walk around the world. What do you think they do? When they see demons that often show their divinity, they say that demons have repeatedly appeared and caused trouble in the world, so they killed them. And demons themselves are not good things. And they also like to do bad things. So when you see a demon in the wild, of course, you quickly cover the eyes and mouth of the child and run away in a hurry. When you get home, you don't dare to say it everywhere. First of all, I don't have a good impression of demons, and I think it's bad luck. Second of all, I'm afraid that if I keep saying it, I'll really provoke demons. Look at those children shouting about ghosts in the middle of the night, and when the ghosts come, they'll be scolded by the adults. That's it. As for those big demons that low-level disciples can't afford to provoke, there's still the Daotong. There are only 100 known big demons above the true state, and they are scattered all over the world. There are also many fights between them, and the Daotong and Kenzo have hundreds of cultivators above the true state, and they work together. Which big demon would dare to appear in the world again and again to recruit believers? Look at that ghost emperor. His cultivation is close to the two saints, but he was still killed by 5 cultivators at the risk of their lives. And yet, he fled to the sky-piercing lake and ran into hatred. As Li Yunqin spoke, he shook his head, as though he was amused and annoyed at the same time. 2 great demons. In such a situation, instead of helping each other, they started fighting again. Both of them are crippled. What AF** king retard. Look at Daotong and Kenzo. Old Taoist Lu hurriedly smiled apologetically and poured more tea for Li Yunqin. But these few envoys of our Shun Long Jiao, from what I've seen over the past few days, they're all very good. They are not as savage as other fiendish demons. Li Yunqin shook his head and sighed. No one knew what he was sighing about. He looked at the tea that Lu Laodao had poured for him. Then his eyes drifted to the dried sweet potatoes on the wooden plate. Laodao thought for a moment, then reached out and pinched a piece. Brother Xian, you can try this. Jing Yang. That fellow Taoist made it himself. It's clean and chewy. Li Yunqin subconsciously reached out his hand. But it was just a movement and he quickly withdrew it. He looked at the dried sweet potatoes again and said in a low voice, "I'm not hungry." This was the first time Lu Laodao saw him lose his composure like this. His eyes flashed. and he put down the dried sweet potato. Li Yunxin was silent for a moment, then asked him, "Are you tired?" Lu Laodao shook his head. "After all, I'm an emptiness realm cultivator. I don't get tired easily." Li Yunxin responded, and was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly said, "AI. Actually the path of Shen Dao and the path of human cultivation. Do you think there are any similarities?" "There are. Why do you think Dao Tong and Kenzo need to go through the heavenly tribulations? They abandon their feelings one by one, and in the end, they make themselves strange, as if they're mentally ill. For example, they don't see humans as humans. From a certain point of view, they've cultivated into demons." "But you old Lu, think again. An ordinary person, without any unforgettable experiences, has always been raised in a rich mansion. He can't be said to have a noble character, nor can he be said to be wicked beyond redemption. He's just an ordinary person. Then one day, you give him great power, open the door, and tell him to go. Then this person walks into the marketplace, and after a long time, 'This dress looks good, I want it. That beauty looks good, I want it. This mansion looks good, I want it. This beautiful world, this beautiful land. There are too many good things.' Ordinary people will also be greedy and want, but they can only work honestly, occasionally swindle, and spend some effort to obtain it. And this person wants it, and reaches out to take it, because there are almost no opponents in this world. But how can this be done? The world will be in chaos. You say using morals and rules to restrain this matter? There will always be loopholes. Then we might as well renounce our feelings and abandon our desires. Without those desires, we can wholeheartedly seek immortality, and the world will be much better. That's why Daotong and Kenzo have to cultivate their hearts and undergo tribulations. It's not all for the world, but also for yourself. You have so many desires, and they can be easily obtained. So why would you have the mood to focus on improving?" Li Yunxin looked at Lu Laodao, but his eyes slid to the sweet potato for a moment, and then bounced away as if he had been electrocuted. "As for Yin spirits? Demons. They absorb the power of will and the power of faith. How can there be so many problems? Below the Taishang emotionless state, they can't be bothered to undergo tribulations. That's why you see demons do whatever they want, but in reality, they are abandoning themselves. With so many great demons, if they manage them well, they might have more believers, more power of will, and become stronger. But they have so many desires, to eat people, to look at their neighbors, to sleep for a year or two when they are tired, and so on. Demons also have desires, and they don't know how to restrain themselves. So how can they fight against Daotong and Kenzo? Not to mention, to step into the Taishang emotionless state like the two sages, they need something else. This is the same for cultivators and demons. That's why Emperor Li is at the peak of the profound realm, approaching the two sages. But he can never reach the two sages. The peak of the profound realm is a threshold. There is no way to take advantage of it. Li Yunxin sighed. My parents told me that below the peak of the profound realm, as long as the demons have enough power of will, they can directly rush up. But once they reach that threshold, if they want to cross it, they have to go through the tribulations step by step, just like human cultivators. But human cultivators have been passed down for thousands of years, and almost from the beginning, they start to abandon their emotions and desires step by step. And that demon is already in the profound realm. How do you expect him to go through those tribulations? Delusion tribulation? He wants the Taishang Dao. How can he let it go? So I say, why don't those great demons show their divinity and gather incense? I think they should also know this. When Li Yunxin said this, he suddenly fell silent. And fell silent for a long time. Lu Laodao listened to him in silence. At this time he sighed slightly. After a moment of hesitation, he reached out his hand and gently patted on Li Yunxin's knee. Brother Exine, are you feeling vexed? Tell me about it. He knew that Li Yunxin tonight was very different from before. In the past, Li Yunxin also laughed and scolded angrily. He often used words like idiot and retarded to criticize others. But at that time, other people's business was other people's business. Brother Exine stood on the shore and talked about them. But tonight, Brother Exine, although he spoke with fervor and assurance. But Lu Laodao knew that he was also immersed in his emotions. Just now, when he took the sweet potato, he lost his composure, but in fact, he lost his composure from beginning to end tonight. At this moment, Brother Xian couldn't control his emotions very well. Just like how he used to judge others, this person was full of loopholes. This Lao Dao sighed with mixed feelings in his heart, because he realized that at this time, Brother Xian came to find him. He had given his most vulnerable moment to her. Li Yunxin turned his head. He stared at the white paper window for a while, and suddenly asked gloomily, "Then, are you willing to part with your fellow Taoist?" Just now, when he talked about demons Daotong and Kinzo, he was very impassioned. But now he seemed to have lost his spirit, and even his voice was a little hoarse. Lu Laodao didn't expect him to ask this. But looking at his expression, it wasn't a joke. So he thought seriously. In this world, there are always gains and losses. Fellow Taoist Shirkuizi took me in when I was in trouble, and I am grateful for her kindness. I also love her. But now in this situation between you and her, if I leave her, Lao Yin said, she will be sad for some time, but it will get better. Feelings, alas. I Lao Dao am a man of experience. I won't be able to endure it for long. At first, I will feel sad, but as time passes it will fade. In the end, there will still be someone who can't let go. But I can't let go, and it's just a thin thread that connects my thoughts with that person. Knowing that there is such a thread and such a person, it is no longer very tight. And Brother Xian, there will always be a lot of inconveniences if you leave me. That is a matter of life and death. I am. At this point, he heard a light sound outside the door. Then came the sound of extremely light footsteps, and the sound of the door closing very carefully. Lu Laodao suddenly stood up and looked at the door, but he only looked for a while, then slowly turned around and sat down again. Alas, that's good. He sighed. That's good. Li Yunxin looked at him. Tell me what happened when you came here. Lu Laodao smiled bitterly. After thinking for a while, he slowly told him what happened during those days. My real name is Lu Gongzan. I was a bandit in my early years, and my nickname is Ghost Teller. I killed a constable just now, and I have nowhere to go. Do you dare to let me in? Li Yunxin sighed and smiled. So after you said that, she didn't ask you anything, and only let you stay. In fact, during these days demons and Daotong cultivators might have come looking for you. Whoever came would be a disaster. You too. Shirkuizi can barely say that you have the concept. You're just an ordinary person who learned some body-strengthening martial arts. But she took you in. And she might die because of you, old Lu. How can there be such a sentimental and foolish woman in this world? Li Yunxin looked down. All the men in this world have hearts of stone like us. Lu Laodao slowly frowned. Brother Xian, you? I provoked a girl, said Li Yunxin. I don't know how I feel right now. Chapter 162. Actually, in the past, it's not like there weren't any girls who tried to kill themselves for me. I've seen it before. I've actually seen it before. He looked out the window, seemingly thinking about something that happened a long time ago. I've seen a lot of them. But this one is different. I thought she was a demon. A demon is different from a human. Cruel, cunning, and heartless. But this one is very different. She subverted my perception. Li Yunxin frowned and said slowly, actually, it's not just about feelings. Well, it's also because my perception of a certain group of people was subverted at that moment, causing a strong psychological impact. I found out that they can be like this. This is something I never thought of before. At first, he frowned as he spoke, but slowly, he seemed to have found some clues as he spoke. Or perhaps the water finally found a gap and couldn't wait to pour out. His words slowly became smoother, and his expression no longer looked dispirited. With every sentence he spoke, he became more spirited. So in essence, I hypnotized myself. That woman first expressed her affection to me in every possible way, so I thought she loved me. But I didn't have any true feelings for her, so I didn't value her love. I thought it was shallow. I was also confident in my own judgment, so the impression was even more profound. At that moment I heard her first. Then I found out that she really loved me and was thinking for my sake. On one hand, it was an emotional subversion, and on the other hand, it was a cognitive subversion. And I was so confident in my own judgment. So this new reality completely destroyed my previous perception. I was stunned. Once my rational thinking stopped working, and my defense mechanism was temporarily lifted, then the woman's intentional or unintentional hints and guidance made my habitual thinking take another path. Love. Li Yunxin stood up and frowned slightly. Yes, it's like this. It's not like I haven't experienced this kind of feeling before. It's because of an illusion. It's because of misdirection. It's because of a temporary breakdown in my defense. He turned to look at Lu Laodao. Am I right? Laodao coughed. Brother Xi, I don't know the whole story yet. Li Yunxin summarized the matter almost immediately. After that he stared straight at Lu Laodao. Don't you think so? Was it an illusion? Lu Laodao lowered his head and thought for a while, not answering his question. Instead he said solemnly, there's only one thing. Brother Xian, that palm of yours could have killed her. As for her father, according to what you said, his divine abilities are above yours. So killing her would be as easy as flipping his palm. But it only sent her flying to your side. Brother Xian, if her father wants to kill her, he can do it himself. But since you showed mercy, why did you send her flying to your feet? At that time, you were 10 feet away from Dongting, and you hurt her before. If you had the intention to kill her, then wouldn't the Lord Dongting have shown mercy for nothing? I don't know the reason for this. But to be honest, I, Lu Laodao, think it's the Lord Dongting and the Red Lady who took the risk and used the trick of injuring herself to gain the confidence of others. Since he could make his daughter lose her life and become a ghost cultivator, he wouldn't care about her dying again. The Lord Dongting is in charge of the 1,000-mile Great Lake. His daughter is just convenient, but not irreplaceable. He slowly raised his head and looked at Li Yunxin. Don't you think so? But Li Yunxin didn't speak. He sat down again and just rubbed the rough teapot on the table. Lu Laodao shook his head slightly. It's not that, there are no other possibilities. But Brother Xian, you said that the most treacherous thing in the world is the human heart. If it's not the trick of injuring herself to gain the confidence of others, then the Lord Dongting was angry that she let you go and gave her a palm. That palm was merciful. If he could be merciful even when he was so angry, then when the Red Lady went back, and the Lord Dongting thought carefully, he wouldn't do anything to her. She might be grounded and punished, but her life should be safe. Brother Xian, if you really can't let go of her, then deal with the things in the city of Wei. Lu Laodao patted his palm on Li Yunxin's knee. Then you go and deal with the Lord Dongting. At that time, the outcome of the matter will be known. You said that everyone has an inner demon. It's just whether it will be noticed or not. Now your inner demon is better than others, isn't it? Alas! Li Yunxin sighed. Then he laughed. You've improved a lot. But Lu Laodao didn't laugh with him. He just looked at him worriedly. Brother Xian, it's not good for you to be like this. Or, we can postpone the things in the city of Wei. Then we can make a long-term plan. Li Yunxin stared at the sweet potato chips on the wooden plate for a while. Finally, he pinched a piece and chewed it slowly in his mouth. No need. He closed his eyes and leaned back on the rattan chair. I know what my problem is. If you hide things in your heart for a long time, you will become weak. I have hidden myself for too long. Hurry up, hurry up. Finish these things quickly. I've had enough of hiding. You know it's tiring. He shook his head against the chair. Then he pointed at the wooden plate. Bring me some of this. Okay. After a while, they heard the rooster crowing. But you're very accurate. Li Yunxin opened his eyes and tilted his head to look at Lu Laodao. You can go with me to many places. And you've cultivated the water cloud force, which can prolong your life. But that one will probably die of old age. It's not a good result. Lu Laodao opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He unconsciously stroked his beard. His hair was originally white, but now it had become jet black, each strand translucent. He didn't look like a man in his 60s, but more like a man in his 50s. And after such a long time, you thought I was dead. But you didn't teach her the water cloud force. It's just the rules, Lu Laodao said in a low voice. Brother Xian taught me the way of the divine heart. The way of the divine heart can't be imparted without reason. Li Yunxin curled his lips. We're family. You don't need to say that. Make a copy for her before you leave tomorrow. She can protect herself. Okay. Li Yunxin continued to sit on the rattan chair. She closed her eyes and leaned back for a while, stroking her fan. He touched his fan, and a purple talisman appeared in his hand. He casually tossed it to Elder Lu and said, I looted this from Song Yunzi after I killed him. It's annoying to carry it around. I always think of that old thing. You should give it to her. Lu Laodao carefully held the talisman and looked at it. He raised his head. Ah, Brother Xian, this treasure. Bulsh * T treasure. Li Yunxin curled his lips. It'll be gone after one use. You keep it. Lu Laodao wanted to say something but hesitated. He put the talisman away. Okay. However, just as he put the talisman into his sleeve, Li Yunxin wiped his fan and threw something to him. Lu Laodao quickly caught it. It was a small bottle made of suet white jade. It's said that it can prolong one's life and promote blood circulation. It's something refined by the Pill Cauldron sect of the Shangqing sect. I don't need it. You can ask her to keep it. This time, Lu Laodao finally stood up and sighed. Brother Xian. Laodao, I'm just talking to you. I'm sure you can see it clearly. Li Yunxin closed his eyes and didn't say anything. Lu Laodao looked at him for a while and sighed. Okay. But I won't take it anymore. You can't take it even if you want to. Lu Laodao laughed. After thinking for a while, he finally said, Seeing you so troubled tonight, Laodao, I feel happier. Seeing that Li Yunxin didn't reply, he shook his head. I'll send it to her. Li Yunxin raised his hand and waved. Lu Laodao opened the door gently and closed it gently. The rooster crowed 3 times. It seemed to be the chickens raised by Shirquizi in the courtyard. This sound attracted pheasants from unknown places. Or roosters living in the house of a family living in the wilderness. Indistinctly, the sounds of crowing rose and fell one after another. No one could imagine that there were 2 people, 5 monsters, 1 ghost, and 1 mythological beast living in harmony on this small platform in the middle of Nanshan Hill beside Dongting Lake. He sat alone in this room with his eyes closed for a while. Then he opened his eyes. The rooster crowed early, but it was still dark. He let out a long sigh gently and looked at the roof. Lu Laodao was a man after all, so he had to be a little sloppy. And it seemed that Shirquizi didn't want to do too many things for him. After all, they had been together for less than a month. Then he saw a spider web on the roof. It was half broken, and one corner was drooping. A spider with slender legs was hanging in the air. No one knew what it was thinking. Hong Nyangzi, Li Yunxin subconsciously muttered to herself. He planned to let Lord Dongting fight with Daotong and Kinzo to death. Unexpectedly, Lord Dongting hit a trump card. Now the situation is reversed. Lord Dongting is sitting and watching him fight with the Taoist orthodoxy. In the middle of the lake, Hong Nyangzi said that there was a way to distinguish the dragon aura on him. Damn it! What was the way? It was not the kind of game where the level was above the head. The skins of cultivators and demons were not damaged, and there was no such thing as judging by the fluctuation of spiritual aura. One should be in a certain realm. If a person could not control and release his spiritual aura freely, and his spiritual aura leaked out so crazily, then he would not be far from death. He had to figure it out. How could he see through his dragon aura so easily? He didn't want someone to suddenly jump out and say, I know you're the dragon's son, when he was walking on the road. After the city of Wei, he had to go to Dongting. The dragon had 9 sons, but only Qi-Wen was in the transcendent state. The transcendent state and the true state didn't have a progressive relationship. The gap of one state was unreasonable. Why was Dragon 9 the only one? The 9th young master got along with Lord Dongting in a strange way. There was no other dragon son in the world who was accompanied by a big demon. Why did they get along with each other? Hong Nyangzi repeatedly told him that the relationship between Lord Dongting and Qi-Wen was unusual. And Lord Dongting did show an unusual attitude to dragons. He, a 3,000-year-old big demon, was trapped here. Who was it? Li Yunxin closed her eyes and allowed these thoughts to churn in her mind. Then, she opened her eyes again. The spider with slender legs on the roof was gone. He didn't know where it went. Li Yunxin stared at it for a while and snapped his fingers. A gust of wind hit the web and nailed the hanging corner to the wall. He stood up and pushed the window open. He saw the sky was getting brighter. Further away was the vast wild forest between Dongting and the city of Wei. In the dim light of dawn, the forest was a deep green, like a huge piece of dark green jade. Even with his eyesight, he couldn't see the city of Wei in the sky. The wild forest was so vast that it was almost as big as Dongting. He felt a familiar feeling. It was the urgent desire to conquer that day when he stood by the Wei River and saw the surging river for the first time. It suddenly became clear. This river and mountain, although it was only a small corner of the world, but it was always the strongest and most reliable support. Li Yunxin slightly lowered his head and remembered a word he said to Lu Laodao a quarter of an hour ago. To the old Taoist, perhaps it was just an extremely ordinary word. But for him, a family, he repeated in a low voice. He couldn't help laughing. Chapter 163. More than half of Taoxi Road in Liuhe Prefecture of City of Wei had collapsed. It was full of broken walls and ruins with green weeds growing all over it. There shouldn't be such a place in this famous city, but it had been deserted for a month. No one dared to touch it, because half of the properties on this street belonged to Magistrate Zhao, who had gone to the capital to apologize. Although Magistrate Zhao was scolded by Fairy Ling Kong of the Langya Cave and wanted to resign. But Fairy Ling Kong of the Langya Cave was also said to have died. Maybe she had died in City of Wei, and Magistrate Zhao and the 3 prefectural magistrates had gone north for a while. No one knew what to do with Taoxi Road. Of course, the common people didn't know these things. Only the rich and powerful in the city knew. But it had been more than 30 days since the night of the Dragon King's divine presence. But there was no definite news. People knew that a miraculous thing happened on Shaohan Street a few days ago. The shopkeepers on the street swore that they saw a deity wearing a red helmet and red armor, telling them to leave quickly, and that a powerful person was going to subdue a demon here. Later, the young master of the Yu family said that it was a righteous deed done by a powerful person of the dragon cult. People thought about it and felt that it was true. The dragon cult worshipped the dragon prince. Since they were disciples of the dragon prince, those deities wearing red helmets and red armor must be shrimp soldiers or crab generals. No one thought about it. Shrimp and crab would only turn red when they were cooked. People also knew that a Daotong cultivator came to the city of Wei of the Danding sect of the Shangqing dynasty. They also knew that Qiu'er died on the street. They wanted to send their family members to find out who it was, but they couldn't find out anything. So they were puzzled. The Daotong cave was a real fairyland in the eyes of the common people. People who came out from there were all immortals. Since Fairy Ling Kong died in City of Wei, why there was no movement until now? The new cultivator didn't look like a big shot. Although Fairy Ling Kong didn't disturb anyone when she entered the city, she was able to denounce 4 imperial court officials at the Baohua gathering. How impressive was that? But this person didn't say or do anything. No one could understand Daotong's thoughts. As for the imperial court, anyone with some knowledge in the city knew that the emperor and the Zhao family were ruling the world together. The great painter of the dynasty died in the city of Wei without knowing why. At any other time, in any other place, the sky would have been turned upside down. But in the city of Wei, people had almost forgotten about it, because the city of Wei was under the rule of the Zhao family. But now, the Zhao family and the imperial court had not taken any action. There was no news of the imperial court punishing them, and there was no news of a new official taking office. The official who was in charge of the city of Wei was not willing to take over this hot potato. He only showed up twice in more than 30 days and explained some things. After clearing out the treasury in the mansion, he ordered his attendants to drive 3 large carts of heavy boxes and never came back again. Therefore, only the official registrar, deputy prefect, and other officials maintained the operation of this famous city with a population of hundreds of thousands. Naturally, there was no lack of help from the rich and powerful families in the city, because he knew the complicated inside story. When he appeared on the ruins of Taoshi Road with a group of people and started to clean up the area around the Dragon King Temple, all the rich and powerful families at the city gate who knew about this matter were shocked. Who did this? But whose permission did it come from? Did something big happen that they didn't know? Some people went to inquire and investigate. Finally, they brought back a piece of news. They were people from Egret Continent. They were all followers of the dragon cult. Egret Town and Egret Continent. There were about 100 households in Egret Town, and more than 300 people were followers of the dragon cult. And there were more than a dozen villages and towns scattered around the wild forest. And there were also about 1,000 followers. More than 1,000 people believed in the dragon cult. And it wasn't some kind of method to turn around and worship other gods. According to what Li Yunxin said, twice a day, no matter when, must be in a place with water vapor, such as a river, lake, or inland, to scoop up a ladle of water and recite a sentence or two. The leader of the dragon cult will enjoy immortal happiness forever and live as long as the heavens. And he repeatedly emphasized that twice a day, no more, no less. If it was too much, the vast sea kissed the dragon prince so much that he would get angry. If it was too little, the dragon prince would feel that it was disrespectful and would get angry. At first, people muttered that the dragon prince was too picky and difficult to serve. But the dragon cult always gave some small things. For example, toilet paper with some warning words written on it, a small cloth bag embroidered with a dragon head, and even 2 or 3 copper coins that were said to be blessed by the dragon prince. It was not given to everyone. Instead, it was given to a few believers who went to worship at a certain time every day. They were all poor fishermen, mountain people, and farmers. The rich people of Egret Town didn't care about these things. But for others who might not be able to pull a piece of new cloth for several years, these small things were attractive enough. So even if they were tired, they would still go and take a look. Since they wanted to see it, then they would just recite it. Slowly they found the benefits. For example, their family lived in the Pamir Mountains northwest of the wild forest, and occasionally went to Egret Town to exchange some game for salt, but suddenly heard about the dragon cult. Anyway, they had to go back the next day, so they were not in a hurry, so they went to Nanshan to take a look. In the end, they received some small things from the dragon cult, and learned about this rule. After returning to the Pamir Mountains, they scooped up some water, and said a few words. Others were curious and asked what they meant, so they told them the meaning of these words, and what they saw on Nanshan. Then they said solemnly that they could only recite it twice a day. If they recited it too much, the Dragon King would get angry. Sometimes a naughty kid asked, "Why must they recite it twice?" Then he would frown and stare, and throw down 2 words stiffly and confidently: rules. In a clan society, the rules were the most important. The kid was scared and didn't dare to ask again. This was a very prestigious thing. This kind of prestige and satisfaction was hard to imagine for people of Li Yunxin's time. The kingdom of Qing was rich, and the city of Wei was rich. This was something Li Yunxin knew. However, no matter how rich an ancient society was, it was still an ancient society. Around the rich city of Wei, what kind of people lived in the villages in the wild forest? Probably not 1 in 1,000 people could read. Hundreds of people had never left the wild forest in their lives. It was only 180 li from the city of Wei. In Li Yunxin's world, it was only an hour or 2 by car. However, in this world, there were hundreds of people, generations after generations, who had never left this 180 li. For them, the wild forest, or even the Pamir Mountains, Copper Mountains, any mountain ridge or village was the whole world. As for the city of Wei, in their minds, it was almost in the category of neighboring countries. The people in the city of Wei might know the emperor of Li Kingdom, but the people in the mountains probably didn't know that the emperor of Qing Kingdom had changed. Even for some people like this, there was no hope and nothing new. But at least they were used to this kind of life for generations, without any way to rise. If Li Yunxin was imprisoned in such an environment, he would probably go crazy immediately. Hunters went up the mountain to hunt and collect game, and the money they got was just enough to feed themselves. Farmers worked on 1 mu of land, with backward technology and low output. If they could not starve to death with wild vegetables and game, it could be considered a good life. If they could really save some money and build a new house for their son, it could be considered a success of this generation. Every day they had to worry about food. This was only a big thing. What they saw and talked about was the people in the village. A month ago, the Nyo family's daughter-in-law woke up in the middle of the night to find a snake coiled up on the windowsill. This matter could be talked about for a whole month without getting tired of it. And when they saw the Nyo family again, they would feel strange. The snake was a little dragon. Their family had a little dragon coiled up in the middle of the night. Who knew if the child in the Nyo family's daughter-in-law's belly was going to be successful? It was this kind of environment, and this kind of people who knew about the dragon cult, and the strange rules of the dragon cult. Life immediately became fresh, novel, and different from the rest. The cult members became mysterious and different in the village. And this rule, which people thought was provocative and difficult to serve, became more solemn and more like a rule because of its ritualistic nature. Probably everyone had experienced it. Li Yunxin had also experienced it. A normal person who originally had a low position in society and had toiled his entire life. Once someone asked him about some ancient rule or rumor that only he knew. His originally dull and lifeless face immediately glowed with a different light. His whole person immediately became solemn and steady. Then he cleared his throat, glanced at the crowd and said slowly, "This matter, there is such a thing." Li Yunxin understood this kind of society, understood this kind of people, and understood this kind of rule. Therefore, many small details that came from his hands made the dragon cult quickly spread in a very short period of time, and gathered a large number of pious believers for various reasons. Now, the first batch of nearly 100 believers entered the city, and then gathered at the ruins of Taoshi Road. Among these people there were stonemasons, carpenters, tailors, and bricklayers. There were also barefoot doctors, hunters, and even old men who used to work as accountants. This group of people had experience, knowledge, and strength. Under the organization of a Taoist priest named Lu Gongzan, they spent only 3 days to quickly clean up a large area of land, and even put some stones and wood that could be used again. It seemed that they were preparing for a large-scale construction. Building something always required a lot of money. It was mainly divided into manpower and material resources. This group of people who called themselves Dragon Cult didn't seem to be lacking in manpower. As for material resources, they had already boldly cleaned up a lot of suitable materials from the ruins. Of course, these things weren't enough, so their progress stopped. About 100 people built temporary wooden shacks on a large piece of land that had been cleaned up. They lived, cooked, talked, and laughed, but no one knew what they were going to do. Some people went to ask, but these people only said that the cult leader ordered them to wait. This was not good. Such a large number of people gathered together, and they advanced and retreated in an orderly manner. If the prefectural magistrate or any of the 4 prefectural magistrates were still here, they would turn pale with fright, and immediately dispatch the officials to put this group of people in jail. 100 people, not doing production, and gathering every day to talk about things that others couldn't understand. If this wasn't a rebellion, what was it? But now that the chief official wasn't here, the registrar and the prefectural magistrate didn't have the courage. They didn't want to rashly offend the rich and powerful family behind the dragon cult. The other rich and powerful families in the city also didn't want to interfere in this matter. Who knew which family in the city, or which noble in the capital, started this matter? Because after some investigation, they all knew that the dragon cult had a great influence in the Egret region. They originally thought that it was a smart person who started it. But now, it actually came to the city, a place that they didn't dare to touch, and didn't even inform anyone, and started it on its own. According to the laws of the Daqing state, what was a sect that didn't register with the government? It was a cult. And to be able to make such a great influence of a cult, it must be an experienced person. An experienced person wouldn't not know the rules. But now he didn't follow the rules. If they were to carefully ask, investigate, and take a look, they would realize that their previous thoughts were also wrong. This dragon cult not only didn't make money, but often helped some poor followers. Those who wanted to understand more immediately retracted their tentacles, as if they had been electrocuted. This was winning people's hearts. Except for the emperor. What kind of person would want to win people's hearts like this? Who dared to touch it? And who was so daring? Who did this? For a moment, all the rich and powerful families in the city of Wei were guessing, including the Yu family. The master of the Yu family, Yu Qi, was the head of a prosperous family. His family had been rich and powerful for many generations. Starting from a cloth merchant, they gradually had some influence and scale. Then they tried to climb higher branches, and with the help of other forces, after 10 generations of management, they finally had the power to speak in the city of Wei. In his generation, his family had met with disasters one after another. Yu Qi was a smart and capable person, but his father passed away early. When he took over the family business, he was only in his early 20s. No matter how smart a person was without experience, there would always be some tricks that he couldn't understand. And at that time, Yu Qi didn't understand. Therefore, the Yu family was in danger. Finally, he gave birth to his son, Yu Meng, who was the reincarnation of a god. He helped him through difficulties again and again, and made friends with some people. Only then did he realize that the natural disaster he encountered was actually a man-made disaster. Some influential people did things like this. He could kill you with a wave of his hand. If you understood his intention and obediently catered to him, you would immediately feel better. But if you couldn't understand, since you were an idiot who couldn't understand, it was better to get rid of you. Now the Yu family had passed the crisis, and Master Yu was no longer the Yu Qi, who had just taken over the family. However, he knew the movements of the dragon cult in the city of Wei in the past 3 days. He frowned for 3 days. Things were not what he had imagined. Chapter 164. Now the Yu family was prosperous, and was the richest family in the city of Wei. Looking at the entire Qing kingdom, it was also one of the richest families. But only Yu Qi knew how much of the Yu family's wealth belonged to him, and how much belonged to others. As for who these others were, he didn't know and he didn't know. He had so many properties under his name, but he didn't control more than 20% of them. If Li Yunxin knew this, he would say to him, "You are just a white glove." But in this era, in this world, this identity had another name, White Fan. Probably no one knew what the original meaning of this name was, or when it was passed down. But if one tried to explain it, it could be a white fan gently waving, not attracting dust. The nobles in the capital also loved money, but the emperor didn't like it. He thought that fighting for profit with the people was a loss of benevolence and integrity. As a result, many people pledged allegiance to nobles, offering their wealth or talents in order to seek greater benefits. In many people's eyes, Yu Qi was an extraordinary and ruthless character. Because he didn't go to a certain family, but a certain family found him first. According to people, when Yu Qi first took charge of the Yu family, that nobleman took a fancy to his family business and casually played tricks on him. With this, the Yu family was almost destroyed, but Yu Qi managed to survive. A small businessman with such ability made the nobleman look up at him, and then use a few more tricks. But he managed to survive one by one. This time, Yu Qi really entered that person's eyes. He laughed at him for not knowing how to appreciate favors, and sighed at how interesting he was. So he seriously set up a killing move. At this time, everyone thought that the Yu family would die. Who would have thought that Yu Qi would obediently and decisively submit to him? That nobleman asked him why he had wasted so much effort before, and now the result was the same. It was said that Yu Qi said at the time, "People love brave and heroic people, and don't like cowardly and weak people." If he had been cowardly and offered his family business, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to sit in the main hall of the manor and talk today. A wise lord loves a hero. He wanted to be a hero. Hearing this, the nobleman laughed heartily. Not only did he not take his wealth, but he also asked him to work for him. After doing a few things, after 6 or 7 years, he was finally recognized. He became one of the wealthiest merchants in the Daqing state. But regardless of whether the truth of the matter was as the rumors said, that it was all because of Yu Sheng's courage and wisdom that he resolved every crisis, or that there really was a god in his family, he was now used to this kind of feeling. Even the city of Wei would tremble when he waved his hand and stamped his feet. Although what he had might be lost at some point, at least for now, he felt that he could still do something. He considered himself a hero. How could a hero be willing to be a puppet or a servant for the rest of his life? Because of this, he had originally planned to have a good talk with the dragon cult. Or, it could be said that he was just being polite. He didn't think that the people behind the dragon cult had the qualifications to be on equal footing with him. But that night, when the Taoist priest of the dragon cult went to his son's room and pretended to appear in his dream, Yu Sheng was sitting in the study, reflecting on himself. Every month, he would reflect on himself, carefully combing through everything that had happened since he could remember, because he knew that his current power and status could easily inflate one's ego. Doing what he did, once he became arrogant and did not grasp his identity and status well, he would be in big trouble. Unfortunately, like all the older people, after a period of self-reflection, he was dragged into the memories of the past. Then he heard the thunder, and heard the servants say that something had happened in the city. He drank 3 cups of wine that night. At that time, he was still tipsy, and didn't feel much panic. Seeing that he was calm and collected, the servants who were originally anxious also calmed down. At that moment, Yu Sheng remembered the scene when he clenched his hands, took a deep breath, and walked into the nobleman's mansion with his head held high. At that time, he staked everything on one throw and forced himself not to tremble. When he spoke, he took a deep breath so that his voice wouldn't tremble. However, the nobleman sitting in the hall was drinking tea with his eyebrows lowered. What he remembered most clearly was that the nobleman was wearing a purple robe, embroidered with golden peonies. As he spoke, he stared at the robe and thought, "If I die here today, I will be like the red and purple robe on the robe. If I escape today, I will be as grand and rich as this golden embroidery. In the future, I will be like this nobleman, a person like him." Therefore, when he saw the servant's panicked expression, he remembered the golden peonies on the robe. Suddenly, he felt that what he wanted to do many, many years ago seemed to have been accomplished. But at that time he said, "I want to be a hero." But where was that? Just when he was immersed in this kind of subtle emotion, someone came to report what happened in Yu Meng's room. Normally, Yu Sheng should be frowning, but after hearing this he suddenly laughed. There was actually someone who was not afraid of death and wanted to attack his family. This person was like him, at least like that time. Therefore there was the incident on the second day. Yu Qi very much wanted to meet that Jiaozhu of Shenlong Jiao and have a talk, and then use it to do something else. He wanted to be a hero, not a puppet. But in these 3 days, he found that the dragon cult was not the dragon cult he had imagined. He actually couldn't see through it. What did that group of people want to do? Until the 4th day, someone sent an invitation. The invitation came from the dragon cult, and the poster called himself, "The Vast Sea Kisses the Dragon Prince Li Yunxin." He said, "The dragon cult wants to do good," hoping to meet the elder and talk about the opportunity. Yu Sheng stared at the invitation for a while, but not because of the content. He had seen the content of this invitation many times. Some arrogant Jianghu people would always send him such an invitation. He looked serious and experienced, but he couldn't hide the awkwardness in his eyes and the arrogance in his words. Just like when he was young. But the name sign was too strange. He had an impression of the name Li Yunxin. At first, his son saved a young man named Li Yunxin on the roadside. He didn't know about it until a long time later, so he didn't take it to heart. Then, his good-for-nothing cousin Xianqingzi went to the Baohua gathering and said there was a Taoist priest named Li Yunxin there. At this time, Yu Sheng remembered this name. It was said that he was a great painter, but he seemed to have some conflicts with the Langya cave. However, Fairy Ling Kong was very polite to him. It was hard to say about the matters of the immortals, so Yu Sheng didn't dare to guess. After that, it was said that Li Yunxin and Fairy Ling Kong both died because they angered the Dragon King or fought with the demons. There were many different opinions on these matters, and there was no conclusion. In these troubled times, there was an unusual movement in the Shaohan Street a few days ago. People said that it was the cultivators of the dragon cult who killed the demons. But from Yu Sheng's point of view, this matter was completely different from what happened on Taoshi Road a month ago. The Taoist priest from the Langya cave was in the city. So how could it be the turn of a rogue Taoist from an evil cult to kill the demons? That night, the one who went to Yu Meng's room was just someone who had a plan and took advantage of the situation. As for the name, if there really was a dragon prince, a mortal wouldn't send a visiting card if he wanted to see him. This leader of the dragon cult, just from this visiting card, he could tell that he had the craftiness and evilness of someone from the pugilistic world. He could indeed make some noise, but it would be hard for him to achieve anything big. So he calmed down a little. Calming down a little, he ignored the leader of the dragon cult for a day. He heard that the people on Taoshi Road seemed to have some problems with their diet and started to buy food everywhere. So he ordered people to invite the leader over. And that day, he didn't just sit there idly. If he wanted to investigate something, there would be results. On the 5th day after the egret cult entered the city, Li Yunxin and Lu Gongzan entered the Yu residence through the back door. Previously, he allowed Yu Meng to provide money and manpower to repair that small street. So he had already formed a relationship with the dragon cult. So he had to figure out everything as soon as possible. After figuring it out, whether to subdue or exterminate them, it would all be up to him. But even with such a contemptuous attitude, when he saw Li Yunxin enter the main hall, he couldn't help but praise in his heart. What a dragon among men! He looked at a young man of 18 or 19 years old, tall and slender, with a face like jade. A pair of sword-like eyebrows slanted to his temples, and a pair of starry eyes sparkled brightly. He wore a plain white robe, and lightly waved a white paper fan made of bamboo in his hand. He looked elegant and handsome. Although he loved his son, he also felt that his son's appearance couldn't compare to that of Li Yunxin. Then he looked at the person behind him. He wore a green Taoist robe, and looked to be between 40 and 50 years old. He also had a good face and a beautiful beard. Yu Qi lightly tapped his fingers. With two people with such good appearances, it was no wonder that the dragon cult's momentum was so strong. When the two of them entered the main hall and stood down, that young man slightly raised his head and cupped his hands. I am the leader of the dragon cult, Dragon Prince Li Yunxin of the vast ocean kiss. Greetings. After saying this, without waiting for a reply, he lifted his robe and rushed to the side to sit. After sitting down, his eyes first drifted to the small table at the side. There was a teacup, as well as a plate filled with dried fruits and candied fruits. That Li Yunxin glared fiercely a few times, then hurriedly retracted his gaze, and sat down with his eyes on his nose on his mouth, and his mouth on his heart. Apart from these three people, there were also maids and servants in the hall. The servants of the Yu residence always had a lot of experience. Now that they saw Li Yunxin's impolite appearance, they first frowned, thinking that this person was a bit too arrogant. That magistrate Zhao didn't dare to act like this when he saw our master before. But then they saw his fierce eyes staring at the plate of fruits, and they immediately understood. But in the end, they were still people of the Yu family, so they forced themselves not to laugh. Looking at his dignified appearance, he was actually a country bumpkin who hadn't seen the world. This really was gold and jade on the outside, but rotten inside. A servant who was serving tea at the side wanted to drink from him, but Yu Qi slightly raised his hand on the table, and the servant didn't say anything. Looking at that Lao Dao Lu Gongzan, seeing his leader like this, seemed to be anxious and angry, but couldn't do anything. Seeing that it wasn't easy to say, "How did I teach you outside?" he glared fiercely at the young man on the seat, and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Yu Qi. "Please forgive me. My leader has just come to the human world, and doesn't really understand the rules and etiquette of the human world. I am Lu Gongzan, the sect leader of the dragon cult, originally from the city of Wei. I believe there are people who recognize me. Today Yu Qi calmly raised his hand, thought for a while and said sit. This Lu Gongzan hurriedly thanked him, and went to sit next to Li Yunxin. At this moment, Yu Qi's good impression of that young man was completely gone. Just come to the human world? These words could be used to coax those villagers, but to say it in front of him. After all, they were two Jianghu people. Who knows where he found a beautiful young man, coaxed him to be the leader. And then this Lu Gongzan used some tricks to win people's hearts. In the future, when he grew up, he would serve this leader with good food and drinks. If things changed, and he had to bear some misfortune, he could push this leader out. He had already used this kind of trick when he was young. But Yu Qi picked up a cup of tea, brushed off the leaves, blew on it, and took a sip. Without looking at that Lu Gongzan, he said, I have heard of your name. That Lu Gongzan hurriedly said in surprise. Ah, you actually know. You used to be called Ghost Teller. Yu Qi put down the cup. You used to be a bandit. That sentence of surprise of Lu Gongzan was instantly stuck in his throat, and he was so embarrassed that he couldn't say anything else. I was a bandit first. As for my reputation, it was still okay, but I was a bandit after all. After that, I left Liangliang and went to the Dragon King Temple on Taoxi Road to be a temple attendant. After that, there were some incidents, huh? Yu Qi glanced at that Lu Gongzan and only said that. He didn't tell him the whole story of him killing Inspector Yin. But a magician, a swindler now also wanted to visit his residence. He had never cared much about his background. Since this Lu Gongzan had made such a big fuss, then he could also not stick to one pattern of subduing a talent. But today, he came with a golden jade leather bag and said some nonsense about the Dragon Prince's first time in the human world. Did he think he was easy to coax? If he wanted to investigate, he could still find out a lot of things. As expected, after saying that Lu Gongzan couldn't sit still anymore. Sweat seeped out of his forehead, and he hurriedly stretched out his two hands, waving them in front of his body. But very quickly, he felt that it was embarrassing, and hurriedly put them down. He only said, to the public. Ayaya, it's hard to say. Although the others in the hall didn't know what their master didn't say, seeing this Lu Gongzan's calm and unhurried manner, now he lost his composure. Finally, someone couldn't help but laugh out loud. Hearing this laugh, Lu Gongzan seemed to be even more embarrassed. He just cupped his hands towards Yu Qi, but couldn't say anything. Yu Qi was still sitting upright, and his face didn't show any sadness or happiness. He said, earlier, someone from your sex sneaked into my son's bedroom late at night and said some things. Although I don't believe it, I still admire those who have such methods and courage. That's why I helped you. But don't think that because of this, my Yu clan will fall for the tricks of you magicians. I still know about your matters. And that Li Yunxin, is he really the one in front of us? Chapter 165. Lu Gongzan looked troubled, as if he was hesitating. But Yu Qi smiled. The master of the dragon cult beside you is probably a fisherman, right? It's rare for him to have such a good appearance. He was originally in the Lu family village of the Changpu Lake. It's not easy for you to find him. After saying this, Lu Gongzan became even more exhausted. He didn't even have the strength to cup his hands. This show of power came fast and fiercely. It seemed that his momentum was really gone. As for the master of the dragon cult, he just sat there blankly and kept looking at Lu Gongzan. He didn't know what to do or what to say. Seeing the two like this, Yu Qi laughed in his heart. He leaned back in the chair again. Someone had already replaced the cup of warm tea that he took a sip of. Tell me about your means. He felt more secure. He felt that he had roughly known the background of the other party. He just needed to hear some details that he didn't think of. For example, how did things develop? How could he be so bold? And he already had a vague inference about these things in his heart. It was his special skill to figure out the background of the other party with a few words. Lu Gongzan seemed to be finally convinced by him. He cupped his hands and said with a bitter smile, You deserve your reputation. You're really a great man. Since that's the case, I won't beat around the bush in front of an honest person. I'll tell you everything. But if I tell you this, hee, although you're a rich family in the city of Wei, you have to sit tight. The way we Jianghu people do things is quite different. Yu Qi took another sip of tea and didn't say anything. Lu Gongzan snorted and said, "Do you know the general trend of the world now?" Hearing his words, his tone, and his expression, the servant girl wanted to laugh again. Yu Qi's face remained calm. He said indifferently, "Tell me about the general trend of the world." That Lu Gongzan seemed to want to regain some ground, because he had just suffered a blow. Therefore, he coughed twice and circulated his qi before speaking in a deep voice. "Today, the Daqing state is at peace, and the emperor is ruling from above. This is the era of peace and prosperity that the sages mentioned. As for the heroes of our generation, if we want to make a name for ourselves, we need a chaotic world. I, Lu Gongzan, have been lurking in the city of Wei for so many years. I have learned some divine Taoism, and have been waiting for the right time. Now the time has finally come. Magistrate Zhao is no longer in Weicheng, and the 3 prefectural magistrates are no longer in their positions. The people inside and outside the city are in a state of panic, and don't know where to go. It's the best time for us to make contributions. Now I've pulled this dragon cult together and gathered some people. After that, not only did I not collect money, but I also wanted to build irrigation works, build roads, and open mines. In this way, the people inside and outside of Weicheng will be more and more loyal, and the dragon cult will be more and more powerful. When the next magistrate comes to Weicheng, the dragon cult will already have tens of thousands of followers. How could he not value me as the commanding elder and the master of the dragon cult? At that time, I will no longer be a Jianghu bandit, but a distinguished guest of the magistrate. When I have unified all the people in Weicheng and built a relationship with the magistrate, I will be able to live a carefree and happy life." Lu Gongzan was so excited that he left his chair and paced a few steps on the spot. "But the only thing this plan lacks is you." Yu Qi pretended that he didn't understand and replied with an, "Oh," with a smile. That Lu Gongzan seemed to think that his words had coaxed Yu Qi. He smiled and said, "Building irrigation works, building roads, and opening mines all require money. But this money is just like dung to me. You are a merchant's family, and you have had enough of being bullied by the officials in the city, right? I am here to help the dragon cult. When we succeed, you will be a friend of the dragon cult, and I will share Weicheng with you." Yu Qi finally couldn't help but laugh very happily. Although his servants and maids weren't sure what their master was laughing about, they had to laugh along with him. They had to laugh, or their master would feel bored. And they couldn't laugh, or they would lose their sense of propriety. In the midst of such laughter, that Lu Gongzan showed a confused expression that appeared several times since he entered the hall. For public, why?" Yu Qi stopped laughing. Everyone's laughter came to an abrupt halt. He shook his head and pointed at Lu Gongzan. "So the general trend of the world you mentioned actually refers to the city of Weicheng? Do you think the city of Weicheng is the world in your heart?" Lu Gongzan didn't know what to say. Yu Qi laughed again. "Let me ask you, even if the city of Weicheng is the world in your heart, if you want to build water conservancy, build roads, open mines, I will still pay for it. Have you ever thought that you are seeking death by doing this?" Lu Gongzan was even more confused. He blinked his eyes, and his voice seemed to be trembling. Please teach me." Yu Qi's face turned cold, and he snorted. "Previously, when I saw hundreds of dragon cult people running to Taoshi Road, I thought you had a powerful background. Now it seems it's because you don't know death." "Fine. Jianghu people, hee. You uncultured people think that just because you know a few words, have some smarts, and understand the common customs, you deliberately speculate the general trend of the world? My Yu family is bullied by the officials in the city of Weicheng." Ha 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 ha. What a joke. Even the magistrate of Weicheng, Zhao Su, had to send an invitation to see me. Lu Gongzan's face became paler as he listened. He stood still and seemed to be at a loss. Yu Qi stopped laughing and stared at Lu Gongzan for a while and snorted coldly. "Building water conservancy, building roads, opening mines. Is that something people like you can do? Recruiting followers, gathering people, Is that something you can do? You openly bought people's hearts under the bright sun. Do you want to make friends with that magistrate? You are rebelling. Hearing this, Lu Gongzan took 3 steps back and sat back on the chair. He was stunned for a while with a pale face, and then he hurriedly said, You save me, save me. Yu Qi shook his head slightly, looked down, and drank a few mouthfuls of the new tea, and then said, It's not impossible to save you. I just said it depends on whether you want your life or money. Lu Gongzan said blankly, I don't have. It's your dragon cult. Yu Qi put down the teacup and looked at him. There are some things you can't do, but some people can. I think you are a smart person, but your identity and status make you ignorant. People of different levels have different views on things like knowledge. In the eyes of those fishermen and farmers, they see their homes, their villages and towns. What about you? Are you a hero in the city of Weiqing? Yu Qi shook his head and smiled slightly. It's a pity in the past. If I knew there was such a person like you, I wouldn't have let you be buried for so long. A person like you, at your level, is already far-sighted. You can see the situation of the Weishui River in the city of Weiqing. But to talk about the general trend of the world, it's not something you can see. Yu Qi said this and sighed slightly. He subconsciously looked down at his robe, purplish red, with golden embroidery. He only took a glance. When he raised his head again, his tone was softer and calmer. Maybe it was because Lu Gongzan had been scared by him. Or maybe it was just because he was in a good mood at the moment. Building bridges and paving roads is done by the gentry and nobles, because this is a good thing for the village, and also a good thing for the magistrate. But if you people do it, it's not a good thing to say. Yu Qi thought for a while. My Yu family is said to be a rich family, but not a tyrant. Your dragon cult is just a motley crew, and I don't have any interest in it. But I appreciate that you are a talent, so I will give you a chance. Speaking of this, he paused for a while. Lu Gongzan understood and hurriedly said, Sir Yu, please give me a clear path. This is a clear path. I will allow you to do what you said just now, and I will give you money. Yu Qi looked at Lu Gongzan and said, But do it in the name of the Yu family. First, I want to see how capable you are. Second, you will do another thing for me. Yu Qi lowered his voice slightly. Investigate the whereabouts of those people in the Wanshan escort agency in the city of Weiqing. If you find this, you will be a member of the Yu family from now on. In the future, not to mention magistrate. So what if you are the governor of a province? Lu Gongzan opened his eyes and seemed to think carefully for a while, and then said, Then this dragon cult is, still in my hands. Sir Yu, you really don't want anything else? He said this, as if he didn't remember the second half of Yu Qi's sentence. So what if you are the governor of a province? He was still thinking about the pitiful power in his hands. Yu Qi smiled. Yes. Lu Gongzan then became happy. He first chuckled, and then a series of flattering words were sent over. When he came, he pretended to be a master, and after being drunk, he put on a heroic look. Now that he got what he wanted, he finally showed his original appearance. Those servants and maids frowned, and even Yu Qi didn't like him. After a few words, he carefully looked at the hierarch of the dragon cult, who had been sitting like a wooden chicken, and then waved his hand to send them out. After the two disappeared outside the door, Yu Qi frowned again. When the maids came to change the warm tea, he waved his hand to signal them to leave. Then he stood up and moved his hands and feet, feeling that the robe didn't fit him. Then he picked up the tea on the table and drank it in one gulp, and then said, Mr. Li, what do you think? A middle-aged man with a clear face and no facial hair walked out from behind the screen at the side of the hall. He walked until he was 2 steps away from Yu Qi, and then raised his head that had been lowered but still frowned. Sir Yu, that Lu Gongzan didn't tell the truth. Oh, you think so? Just now I asked young master to take a look. Young master said that the person he saved was indeed the same as the hierarch of the dragon cult, Li Yunxin. We went to Changpu Lake to investigate, and it was true that Li Yunxin was originally from the village, and he was found by Lu Gongzan. I also asked someone to ask the disciples of the Lingshu Sword Station. They all said that Li Yunxin, who was saved by young master, and showed up in Xianghua building was dead. I thought it was possible that he faked his death. It's probably impossible. First, the people in the 2 stations only said that he was dead, his soul scattered. They didn't tell us the reason, thinking that it was a matter of the Xianmen, and we couldn't understand it even if they told us. But it must have been certain. Second, that Li Yunxin is said to be a more brilliant painter than the imperial advisor. He made a painting in Xianghua building on the spot. This kind of person wouldn't lower himself to mingle with those mobs. Second, he really didn't die. This kind of person, someone who can make a painting, has never been seen in the public. Or have you heard of such a person? When Mr. Li spoke, Yuqi listened calmly, as if he was talking to someone of the same status as him. Now that he was asked, he seriously thought for a while and answered, "I've never heard of him. They only said that there is an expert who can make a painting. But it seems that no one has ever seen an expert who can reach this level." Mr. Li let out a light breath. That's it. How could such a person be allowed to wander about outside? So I concluded that the dragon cult's hierarch is a fake. If he wasn't a fake, he wouldn't have dared to come out like this. Previously, I said that Lu Gongzhan's knowledge was shallow, and I can see it from this. He has schemes, but they are all Jianghu people's methods. It's fine to bluff those boorish fellows, but if it's something else, hee. You're right, mister. I also think the same. Sit down, mister. Mr. Li didn't refuse and sat down. After sitting down, he lightly knocked on the table. You must have thought of all these. Otherwise, you wouldn't have paid Lu Gongzhan to do things. Yuqi also sat down with him, a smile on his face. Oh, why do you think so? Mr. Li shook his head slightly and smiled. There are people who look alike in the world. But exactly the same? That's rare. Did you find another one outside the city of Wei, near the Dongting Lake? Hey, I'm such a cautious person I won't believe it. Yuqi smiled and said nothing. Mr. Li continued. Besides, a few days ago, that person went to young master's room and pretended to be a ghost in his dream. That Lu Gongzhan used to be the temple attendant of the Dragon King Temple on Taoshi Road, Hunyuanzi. As for how powerful this person is, we will know once we investigate. He definitely wouldn't do this. Look at his attitude today. First, he pretended to be profound, then he pretended to be impassioned, and finally, he became vulgar. This kind of person will never achieve anything great. If he did all of this, the dragon cult wouldn't be what it is now. So, there must be a master behind it. This master, you have an idea, right? Yuqi nodded slightly and waited for him to continue. But after a while, he looked up and found that Mr. Li seemed to be deducing to his heart's content. He was waiting for him to continue. He coughed a little awkwardly. Mister, tell me your opinion first. Mr. Li smiled. If I had to guess, it should be the new immortal from Shangqing Danding sect in the city of Wei. Do you know that a few days ago, after the fierce fight on Xiaohan Street, someone saw that immortal at the scene of the incident? Chapter 166. Also, the dragon cult worships the dragon prince. We sent people to investigate the South Mountain. On the so-called golden statue of the dragon prince in Nanshan, there really was a monster that spoke with a demonic aura. You and I both know that the cultivators of the Taoist sect can't stand demons doing evil. But now, the demon is attached to the golden statue. It's fine if it's just a blessing. But now it's gathering thousands of people. If it wasn't for the heavenly abode, how could they ignore it? Hearing his words, Yuqi let out a long sigh and clapped his hands. Wonderful. I thought I had thought about it thoroughly, but I'm not as far-sighted as you. When I said I would pay for him, I did have this in mind. I think there is someone behind him, and I don't know why there is a person with the same face as Li Yunxin. The heavenly abode's cultivation is profound, so it's not difficult for them to change their appearance. Sir, your words have solved all my doubts. But in your opinion, what should we do next? Mr. Li smiled and leaned towards Yuqi. What you are thinking, I am clear about it. But what you're planning is more dangerous than what happened 19 years ago. We can't make a mistake. In my opinion, this matter is good for us. This benefit doesn't only refer to those escort companies, Jianghu people, but also in the long run. After saying this, he waited for Yu Qi's reaction. Yu Qi coughed and thought for a while, then said, "Sir, you're right." Mr. Li smiled proudly. "Then let's wait and see." "They'll probably say, 'Let's wait and see.'" Li Yunqing put down the bowl and let out a long breath. This stall was set up by the roadside, selling sour plum juice. It was cooled with crushed ice and well water. Drinking a bowl of sour plum juice on a hot summer day, where one couldn't even open their eyes, was truly refreshing. He sighed again and said, "Give me 2 more bowls." Lu Laodao hurriedly said, "1 bowl is enough. At my age, it's better not to be greedy for cold." "But Brother Xian, even so, what's next?" The waiter served the sour plum juice. Lu Laodao waited for him to leave before saying, "They plan to take it slow and see, so they must still be on guard." A man like him would not have believed all that I had done just now. In the future, our sect will still be hindered, so Yu Qi will definitely place people in the sect. Brother Xian, if you ask me, why don't you spend some effort to activate your divine ability, and we'll raise some money ourselves. Otherwise, if we only solve the problem in front of us in the future. Li Yunqing shook his head and smiled. He picked up the bowl and drank half of it in one gulp. He was so comfortable that he frowned. Lu Laodao sighed and said, "Alas, why bother with him? The old Taoist is saying that to me, he is a very important person. But for you, Brother Xian, he's not someone worth looking at." When I saw their eyes in the hall just now, I felt sorry for you, Brother Xian. Li Yunqing smiled again and put down the bowl. He said like he was coaxing a child, Okay. I'll tell you, don't sigh." Lu Laodao immediately stopped talking. Li Yunqing thought for a while and said, "Do you think I really care about the dragon cult?" Lu Laodao blinked his eyes in confusion. "Dragon cult, cat cult, whatever cult. I don't care about any of them. When I first created this thing, it was for my power of faith. At that time, Long Sun and Lu Ling had just died, and I didn't know if they were dead or alive. I also didn't know Bai Yunqing's whereabouts, Lord Dongting, and the people of Heaven's abode, so I hid and waited for the right time. Later, after understanding the general situation, I tried to collect some power of faith to make myself stronger. But collecting power of faith would definitely attract people's attention, so I created this dragon cult. First, to deceive people, and second, to make them suspicious of each other, so that I could reap the benefits. But after that, the Li Kingdom incident, the Qing Liangzi incident, and that Lord Dongting was far smarter than I thought. Or rather, he wasn't smart, he was strong enough. Once he was strong enough, many schemes would lose their effectiveness. So I had to change my plan. But old Lu, you see, from the beginning to the end, the dragon cult was just a tool. I didn't have to do anything. Now my identity can be considered half public, but in the future, it will be completely public. At that time, more people will know and believe in me. And there's no need to have a cult. Actually, I don't really like this thing. I don't like mind control. Hearing this, Lu Laodao was stunned. After a while he said, Then this dragon cult is useless now?" Li Yunqing drank up the remaining half bowl of sour plum juice and looked at Lu Laodao seriously. "No, now it's very useful. Or this dragon cult, these ignorant people, these ordinary people, are the key to whether I can keep my life and then solve the problem in the city of Wei. These days, I have been running back and forth, doing a lot of things, saying a lot of words, just for the current situation. To let the people of the dragon cult enter the city, so that I can put on a show in front of someone. I've done all of this just for a single purpose. This purpose is the key to my victory, and this key can be achieved by using the dragon cult. The dragon cult is a layer of my cover. Then it is another layer of cover for the dragon cult. I don't need it to cover for a long time. More than a month is enough." He made the matter sound so serious that old Taoist Lu frowned upon hearing it. In the end, he couldn't help but breathe lightly. "You can think about it in a few days." Seeing him like this, Li Yunqing laughed. "Based on the current situation, you probably can't understand it. But in a few days I will do some things, and you will probably understand it. How smart you are depends on that time." Lu Laodao knew that he was a playful person, so he didn't ask further. However, although the purpose was a matter of life and death for both of them, he always had an inappropriate and relaxed sense of curiosity in his heart. Perhaps in this world, only when he was with Brother Xian, and doing these things that were walking on a cliff, on a tightrope, could he have this contradictory and strange sense of steadiness and relaxation. What Brother Xian did in the city of Wei was already a stroke of genius. He really didn't know what he would do this time. He had just entered the Xianmen, so he didn't know much about many things and backgrounds. However, it didn't prevent him from knowing the huge gap between the transcendent state and the true state. Lu Ling was at the peak of the transcendent state. His strength was far above Brother Xian, and he had many magic treasures. It was almost effortless for him to kill Dragon Sun, who was at the same level as him. However, later, when he fought with Bai Yunxin, the great demon of the true state, he couldn't fight back at all. Right now, Yunzi in the city of Wei was a true state. If Brother Xian didn't set up so many deceptions to make Yunzi suspicious of the Lord Dongting, Bai Yunxin couldn't make a move. If it wasn't Yunzi, but a reckless man or a true state cultivator who thought highly of himself, today wouldn't have happened. It was good to be smart and think too much. However, he was afraid that he would meet someone smarter. At that time, it would be a disadvantage. But he still wanted to know. In a few days, when Yunzi saw through the truth, what else could Brother Xian do? Li Yunxin saw his expression and smiled. Hey, old Lu, are you afraid? Lu Laodao sighed and smiled bitterly. It's good if I am afraid. But now I am really not afraid. The Taoist of the true state is in the city of Wei. We are going to die soon. But I am really not afraid. This is really. Alas. Li Yunxin laughed out loud and pointed at him with her finger. Why else would I say that I love talking to you? You are really a wonderful person. Therefore old Master Lu also laughed with him, left an extra large coin, got up and left. The Yu family was very efficient. On the second day, he sent people and goods over according to the previous agreement. Everyone was shocked that the Yu family was involved in this matter. Later, they found out that they were working for a nobleman. But no one knew whether it was the nobleman who started the dragon cult, or recruited the dragon cult for the nobleman. But no one paid much attention to it since it had come to this point. They said they were going to rebel, because they didn't know who was behind it. Now they knew that it was the Yu family. Many things and rules only applied to ordinary people. Other things and rules might involve some officials and rich families. But with the background and power of the Yu residents, it was very difficult to have any established rules that could really restrain them. Their rules were just a few words from someone behind their back. So after 3 or 4 days, half of Taoshi Road that no one cared about was cleaned up. The Yu family showed their amazing power. Weiqing City had a population of more than 300,000, but they sent out almost 3,000 people in 3 days. Of course, it was not 3,000 people who ran to the ruins to pick up the bricks and tiles. But there were people in charge of people's food, and there were people in charge of animal feed. There were famous doctors in the city, and there were people who were good at human resources management. These people took up 100 or 200 people. The other 2,000 people were transferred from various villages by the Yu family, and they entered the city in batches. They did things without hesitation, and their professionalism was far beyond that of the first 100 people. Li Yunxin sat in a temporary awning not far from the construction site. He squinted his eyes and looked at the bustling scene, and couldn't help but sigh. He understood a lot of things, but it was hard to understand if he didn't see it with his own eyes. For example, he knew that the Yu family was rich, but how rich were they? The Yu family's mansion that occupied half the street didn't shock him enough. It was really not easy to shock a person who was used to skyscrapers in this era. But these days he had a deep understanding. So many people were attached to and under the command of this rich family. And most of them didn't just have an employment relationship, but a vassal. They served a big family for generations, and their loyalty was engraved in their bones. The Yu family in the secular world was like this. Lord Dongting had been operating in Dongting for 3,000 years, and he never left the lake. He didn't know how terrible his hidden power was. As for the Taoist orthodoxy and the sword sect, just the appearance of these two individuals was enough to make him want to gamble his entire family's life for them. They were even more powerful and terrifying existences. Thinking of this, he breathed a sigh of relief, opened his folding fan and waved it. Lu Laodao finished talking with several newly promoted small leaders of the cult outside the awning. He asked them to leave, and then he turned around and walked in. Those small leaders were all fishermen, and 2 of them were rich families in Egret Island. They glanced at Li Yunxin curiously, and then left. When they talked to Lu Laodao, they seemed solemn and serious, but their eyes to Li Yunxin lacked respect and awe. They knew that this beautiful young man was the incarnation of the Dragon Prince, the master of the dragon cult. However, it was just like people believed that the emperor was the son of the god of heaven. People in remote villages of the empire would think so, but when they really met the emperor and got along with him for a few days, the original sacred atmosphere would gradually fade. They knew that he was just a person with terrible power. What's more, Dragon Prince? People believed it when they couldn't see it. But when they saw it, they didn't believe it so much. Li Yunxin knew the importance of mystery in religious beliefs, but he didn't mind it. Soon they would understand everything. Lu Laodao walked in, picked up the pottery pot on the table, poured a bowl of herbal tea for himself, and drank it quickly. Then he wiped his beard with his sleeve. Brother Exine, is there something on your mind again? When did I not have anything on my mind? Li Yunxin slumped on the rattan chair, as if even waving the fan took a lot of effort. I was thinking that it was the right choice not to run away from the city of Wei. After taking over the city of Wei, I finally have a place to settle down and run my business. With my identity, I'm afraid I can't escape no matter where I go. This is called the protagonist's halo, trouble. Lu Laodao ignored the last sentence as usual. Why are you suddenly thinking about this? Looking at these Yu family. Alas. Li Yunxin waved the fan lazily again, then closed it with a swish, and pointed a few times in the distance. See? Among that group of people, I have found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, this is the 16th. Lu Laodao hurriedly turned around and looked at the crowd carefully. However, the people coming and going were all wearing gray and coarse clothes. Plus it was summer, the weather was dry, so it was hard to distinguish. He had to ask, who is Brother Exine talking about? Li Yunxin slowly straightened up. At this time, Lu Laodao heard a slight clatter sound, and then noticed that Li Yunxin's left wrist was wrapped with a thin iron chain. He had seen people wearing bracelets, but he had never seen an iron chain. But when he took a closer look, he found that the small chain was exquisitely made. It was like a thick iron chain was shrunk by a dozen times. Every link and every buckle was meticulously made. He heard Li Yunxin whisper, "You are also a cultivator, so you should know that the spirit of a cultivator is far more powerful than that of an ordinary person. But the spirit is attached to a person's body, so you can't see it even if you open the third eye. But if you see it in other ways, you will find that the spirit of a secular person is only a layer of faint light. But these 16 people, 17, their spirit is dazzling. They are all cultivators." Chapter 167. Hearing this, old Taoist Lu turned around abruptly. The emptiness realm spiritual power that he had cultivated for over a month filled all the meridians in his body. In an instant, his hair stood on end, and his sleeves fluttered even though there was no wind. "Brother Exine, have they come to kill us?" But Li Yunxin smiled and waved his hand. "Don't be so cruel. He's a guest from afar." He stood up and patted Lu Laodao's shoulder. Then, Lu Laodao's spiritual power was calmed down. Lao Dao was slightly surprised. "Brother Exine, you." The spiritual power increased and surged, but it couldn't be stopped immediately. It needed to be calmed down slowly. In Li Yunxin's previous world, people who practiced martial arts had to restrain their spiritual power after practicing boxing. But now, Li Yunxin just patted it for him. Lu Laodao was surprised and then happy. "Brother Exine, you've improved again." Li Yunxin couldn't help but laugh. "What do you mean by improved? You speak like a beginner." The Chikas body is a transcendent realm monster. Even without the power of will, the spiritual power will still increase slowly. Not to mention this season, He didn't care about the cultivators in the crowd. Instead, he walked out of the shed slowly, squinted his eyes, and looked into the distance. Then he said slowly, "It should be the bean seeds." Lu Laodao was a little confused. He didn't know why he suddenly said this. But Li Yunxin stood outside the shed for a while and patted the folding fan. "Let's go. Since there are people here, let's go out of the city and have a look." After saying this, he flashed and appeared in the ruins outside the shed in the blink of an eye. With another step, he was dozens of feet away. Lu Laodao didn't know why, but he knew that Brother Xian wouldn't just look at the scenery. Looking at the busy crowd behind him, he gritted his teeth and used his divine ability to catch up. Soon they went out of the city. There were 1 or 2 people following them. It was noon, and the sun was scorching hot. The road was scorched by the sun. They walked on a smooth official road, of course, smooth by the standards of this era. But it was still dusty. The road surface was not asphalt, but gravel mixed with sand. When it rained, it would become muddy. As Li Yunxin walked, he used his fan to point at the road, the fields in the distance, and the barren hills in the distance. "It's May now. It's time to plant beans. You know what beans are, right?" As a result, Lu Laodao blushed. "Well, I didn't use to produce." Li Yunxin said, "There are 3 kinds of beans around the city of Wei: sesame beans, white beans, and soybeans. Sesame beans were hard to boil and were mainly used to produce oil. White beans are not meant to be eaten, but to be made into dyes. Soybeans, on the other hand, are common, but farmers grow the least of them." After saying this, Lu Laodao was stunned. "Brother Xian, why do you care about this?" Li Yunxin smiled slightly. "It's not that I have nothing to do. It's very useful. Look behind you and see if there are people following you." Lu Laodao turned his head and glanced at them. 2 people. They are dressed normally. Hey, I also sent people to follow them in the past. But these 2, they are openly staring at us without any hesitation. It's understandable that they are bold." Li Yunxin shook his head. "These people seem to be in the realm of conception, or even the realm of emptiness. I think they are serious cultivators. That Yunzi is quite powerful. He can mobilize so many people in private. As for the realm of conception and emptiness, in the secular world, they are powerful figures in a city or a place. At this time, asking them to work and disguise themselves as spies, they can't suppress their pride. Low-level cultivators are more like humans. This is human nature. But speaking of the bean seeds, Old Lu, do you know what it means?" He often changed the topic abruptly. In the past, Lu Laodao couldn't get used to it. But now he was used to it. He put the 2 people behind him, and naturally continued. "Well, food is the most important thing for people. These are just non-staple food?" Li Yunxin smiled while walking. "You see, I was right. Your standard of living in the city of Wei is really middle class. You have a business, you own real estate, you eat white rice for 2 meals a day, and sometimes you eat meat and drink wine. Your life. Even the rich landlords in some remote places can't compare with you. But the city of Wei is a prosperous place. Alas, when you are in Nanshan, you should know what your girl eats, right?" Lu Laodao blushed, but didn't deny it. "Brother Xian, now that you mention it, it's true, she eats a lot of sweet potatoes. Fortunately, you have sweet potatoes here, which have a high yield." Li Yunxin sighed. "Even so, many people still can't have enough to eat. Look at the continuous fields outside the city. None of them belong to those farmers. What really belongs to them is just some corner of the barren land. They rely on those fields to dig for food. Then they also plant grains and beans on those fields for several big families in the city. Look to the west, a field. In a few days, bean sprouts will be planted. Hemp beans are extracted, and the oil dregs and bean cakes are the reward for those tenant farmers. The white beans are sent to the farms near the capital to improve their color. The Daqing state is still white. These things are the staple food you mentioned. The staple food we usually eat is the best non-staple food for those tenant farmers." Lu Laodao was stunned. These people, are they really like this? You think they are bitter? And this is good. In the city of Wei, near the city of Wei, the first city of the Qing kingdom. You can't think of the more remote places, but I can. Unknowingly, Li Yunxin had walked a long way with him, and the city of Wei behind them had almost turned into a green shadow. But it's not your fault. Even in my time. Well, in other places, if you tell someone that there are officials with a monthly income of 2,000 coins, which is equivalent to one tael of silver, a lot of ignorant people will jump out and ridicule you for being ignorant. How can someone have such a low income? They don't know that the city and region they live in doesn't represent the whole world. Li Yunxin became talkative and talked nonstop. However, Lu Daois was dumbfounded. First, he didn't know why Brother Xian cared about these things. He didn't look like someone who cared about the country and the people. Second, he sighed. Brother Xian really knew how to understand these things, and in such detail. He was like an immortal, but he didn't care about his identity. When Li Yunxin paused and turned his head to glance behind, Lu Laodao finally had time to ask. I didn't know what Brother Xian said before. It's a pity that someone like you, Brother Xian, knows these things better than me. But, what are you going to do? Brother Xian went to the Yu mansion before. Did you plan to ask for some benefits for the people? You think too much. I can't control them. Since ancient times, reform has never ended well. I don't want to get involved in this. Besides, I'm not talking about the suffering of the people. I just want you to understand the importance of the bean seeds. Li Yunxin stopped. They had turned into a fork road, and now they couldn't see the tall city wall of the city of Wei. There was a vague outline of a village in the west, but the houses were low and far from beautiful. That was because behind the village was the Wilderness Mountain. During the fight between Ling Kongzi and Bai Yunxin, the Wilderness Mountain was completely burned down. Although the grass sprouted on the mountain again, it would take decades for the trees to grow again. And without the trees, the birds and beasts in the mountain were almost all killed. About 10 years later, this mountain would be a barren mountain. At the foot of the mountain beside the village, there was a large field. There were some unknown crops in the field, but they were not as vast and plentiful as the fertile land near the city of Wei. Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao stopped on the ridge of the field. There was a very shallow canal under their feet. The canal was mostly filled with mud, and there were only a few muddy puddles. The grass beside the canal was also listless, and its leaves drooped. Li Yunxin waved his folding fan in the distance, and gathered up the fields. These fields are now filled with yellow wormwood. Look, it's already withered. After a few days, we will burn these yellow wormwood, and then we will start to plow the fields. After 3 or 4 days of plowing, guess what we will do? Lu Laodao said, Soybean seeds. Yes. Soybean seeds. Li Yunxin sighed. But we still have to wait for the right time. If there is a heavy rain and the land is soaked, it means that it will be a good year. Especially this year. The forest was burned. They can't pick wild vegetables or hunt wild animals. They can't cut firewood to sell in the city of Wei. If they don't want to starve to death, they can only rely on bean seeds this time. You also saw the irrigation canal. They are all like this. This is the best that the village can do. The government also wants to develop irrigation, but where? In the fields of the rich families outside the city of Wei. Tell me one thing, isn't it funny? Li Yunxin squinted at the small village in the distance. The city of Wei is next to the Wei River, and there is a Dongting beside the Wei River. These fields are only a dozen miles away from the Wei River, but they lack water. Because the fields on the other side of the canal are the fields of the rich families. They open up the source of water for irrigation, so that they can receive a little water from the upstream. In fact, is the Wei River short of water? Not at all. Why doesn't it get more water? The aristocratic families say that they are afraid that the water will soak the seedlings. In fact, these people are full of their own fields. Who has the mood to take care of their fields and covet those oil dregs bean cakes? When Lu Laodao heard his words, he had the same feeling that Brother Xian knew this. At this time, this feeling became stronger, but at the same time, another kind of emotion arose spontaneously. These people really have a hard life. Seeing him staring at himself, Li Yunxin spread out his hands and shook his head slightly. You are surprised that I know so much. It's right to be surprised. There are only a few scholars in the city of Wei who know so much and want to know so much. But for me, I used to read a lot and see a lot. So we can't count on the irrigation canals of these farmers. We can't count on them in previous years. The harvest won't be good, but there are mountains. We rely on the mountains to eat. Wild vegetables and game can always fill the stomach. And this Qing kingdom is inland. Logically speaking, such a large piece of land, so large, in a place like the Qing kingdom, it should be quite dry. But relying on the crisscrossing inland water system, and Li Yunqin pointed to himself. Like me, the monsters and demons who call themselves the Dragon King of all places, managed to survive. There are even a few lands of fish and rice. So old Lu, in such a place with bad weather and infrequent rainfall, what do you think the fate of those farmers, and tens of thousands of people, can only be counted on? Lu Laodao finally understood what Li Yunqin wanted to say. A sense of solemn admiration arose spontaneously. He took a deep breath. The Dragon King can reign. Li Yunqin was silent for a while and smiled. He looked in the direction of Wei River. Yes. Count on me, the Wei River Dragon King. Especially these few days, especially these days. So this is why there are more than a dozen Dragon King temples near the city of Wei. Because this is inland, it is always relatively dry. People rely on the sky and the rain to eat. If not the Dragon King, who should they worship? And during this month, I didn't dare to show up. The Lord Dongting can't get out of Dongting. So did you realize? Now it is the end of spring and the beginning of summer, but it hasn't rained at all. This is the normal inland climate, where there are no monsters or demons. So when the yellow wormwood is burned, and the farmers are waiting for bean seeds. Lu Laodao clapped his hands and widened his eyes. Everyone has to think of the Dragon King. That's not a normal thought. Li Yunqin smiled. Not just this time. Bean seeds need rain. But don't they need it at other times? So the Dragon King is actually a very promising profession. But I still don't know how many places I can nourish when I summon clouds and rain. Lu Laodao rubbed his hands happily and sighed. It's a good thing after all. I say, Brother Xi, in your realm, how come it has improved by leaps and bounds these days? Realm is one thing, but actual combat is another. Li Yunqin turned around and saw a cultivator standing in the forest in the distance. He pointed the folding fan in his hand and politely. For example, those two idiots over there. Since we are here to spy on them, we should do it thoroughly. Now they are standing behind the tree. They feel that it's disgraceful to curl up and hide somewhere. But if they stand on the road carelessly, we will find them. They are wavering between a whore and a monument. I feel very distressed when I see them. And our dragon cult takes pleasure in helping others as the foundation of our cult. So we should help them if we can. Hearing this, Lu Laodao was about to volunteer when he suddenly lost sight of Li Yunqin. In the next moment, he suddenly appeared in the forest beside the two cultivators. According to the perception of ordinary people, the place where they stood just now was 100 steps away from the small forest, which was considered very far. But cultivators had sharp ears and eyes, so they could still see clearly at such a distance. Lu Laodao originally planned to follow them, but when he saw the situation in the forest, he was immediately stunned. He saw that Li Yunqin had revealed his fiend god avatar the moment he appeared. His sideburns were as white as snow, and his antlers were as red as blood. He grabbed a cultivator, who was only half his height, in his hand. With just one bite, his head was bitten off. He then opened his mouth and took another bite, and half of his body would be gone. Chapter 168. The toughness of an emptiness realm cultivator's body was far beyond the imagination of mortals. However, in the mouth of the fiend god, such a body was like a soft, pale man. The other cultivator was a Taoist priest from the neighboring Ping city. His Taoist name was Chongpingzi. He used to study under Yunzi, so he was summoned here because of the relationship between master and disciple. He used to learn Taoism in the heavenly cave, then went down the mountain to train in the secular world. He followed his master's orders and didn't provoke those scary big demons. He only killed small demons and was worshipped by the people in the city. Who would have thought that the fellow Taoist beside him would be taken away so easily? Cultivators did think that they might die. The path of cultivation was not smooth. There were all kinds of tribulations and tribulations waiting for them. However, they thought that they might die due to bad luck, die of chi deviation, die of old age as a mortal, or die a heroic death after a fierce battle with a big demon. They didn't think that they would die like this. They didn't even have time to make a Taoist spell, or pick up a talisman before they were eaten. At this moment, Chang Pingzi was dumbstruck. In his field of vision, there was only the fiend god's body, which was like an iron tower that covered the entire sky and covered the earth. All he could see were dark green iron scales, splashing bright red blood, mutilated limbs, torn muscles, and broken bones dyed red with blood. He heard the remaining half of his companion's body fall to the ground like a pile of mud. In an instant, he was awakened from his dazed state. His eyes widened, and he screamed suddenly. He took out a handful of talismans from his sleeve and threw them out in a daze. He only had time to look at the fiend god's horns and hair before he ran away while shouting. An emptiness realm cultivator had some tricks up his sleeve if he wanted to escape. Li Yunxin saw a cloud of dust on the official road. The Taoist priest appeared 100 steps away. However, he didn't chase. He just raised his hand and stretched out his index finger. The air at the tip of his finger suddenly became distorted, and then a bright white light suddenly appeared. With a hissing sound, a twisted and scorching trail was instantly drawn in the air, and it hit the Taoist priest in the middle of the smoke 100 steps away. A miserable cry came from afar. The figure in the distance paused for a moment, but did not fall. Blood splattered all over the ground, but he ran even faster. Then, Li Yunxin put down his hand and turned to look at Lu Laodao. The massacre ended within 2 breaths of time, and there were no signs of human habitation nearby. As soon as Chang Pingzi's shouts disappeared, the cicadas in the forest began to chirp again, creating the background sound of summer. Lu Laodao stood in the sun 100 paces away, staring without moving or saying a word. The tall demon god suddenly opened his mouth and spat on the ground. With a splat, half a body and a head were spat out. He rolled on the grass and into a bush, scaring away a small animal that was hiding inside. Then, a cloud of mist rose around him, and his tall body quickly shrunk until he returned to the size of a normal person. The cloud of mist quickly gathered and turned into a white robe. Li Yunxin frowned and wiped his mouth with his hand, then spat on the ground a few times. Then, he touched the white fan and took out a small jar of wine. He pulled out the stopper, raised his head, and took a big gulp, then spat it out. After a few times he sighed, "What's so good about it?" Seeing that he had returned to his human form, Lu Laodao slowly walked over. Standing beside him, he looked at the broken body on the ground, the dark red blood on the ground, and then at Li Yunxin. Then he coughed. "This is probably, the cooking method is not right. The beef and mutton are not delicious to eat like this." Li Yunxin turned to look at him. "Don't waste your time. I am a demon, but I didn't say that demons like to eat human and flesh. The body is just a vessel here," he pointed to his head. "The things here are the most real. Then, to let them know who I am." Li Yunxin looked at the official road. "That old guy is too timid and thinks too much. If he still doesn't make a move after I have arranged everything, it will be very embarrassing." After saying that, he saw that Lu Laodao was still staring at him, so he laughed. "Are you afraid of me? I won't eat you." "It's not that I'm afraid." The expression on Lu Laodao's face was very complicated. "I heard what Brother Xian said before, so I didn't think too much about it. Now that I saw you with my own eyes, get used to it." "I'm getting used to it. But you have to be careful these days," Li Yunxin said as he walked towards the direction of the city of Wei. When passing by the corpse in the forest, Lu Laodao couldn't help but look at it a few more times, but he didn't say anything. That Yunzi guessed whether I was Dragon Sun hatred or not, but it was just a guess. Now that I showed my Dharmakaya, ate one and scared the other away, that Taoist should know that I am Dragon Sun. Li Yunxin said as he walked. He will have a lot of ideas, but he will make up his mind in the end. I don't know much about the things in Daotong, but I know that some of my family members were killed by some demons. Whether it is for benefits or reputation, I have to do something. So now, it is our declaration of war against him. Lu Laodao followed behind him and didn't say anything. It seemed that he needed some time to digest what he had just seen. Li Yunxin didn't explain more about what had just happened. He believed that the old man would quickly make him adapt to the fact that he was now on the side of demons and fighting against the righteousness of the world. This kind of thing always sounded cool, but not many people could really be a villain to their heart's content. Yes, unconsciously. How did I become an evil villain? This thought flashed in Li Yunxin's mind, and he couldn't help laughing. Lu Laodao didn't know what he was thinking, but he had his own ideas. However, after walking a dozen steps, he caught up to Li Yunxin from a distance of a few steps. After walking for a while, he said absent-mindedly, "Ordinary people don't have any rules when they fight. Scratching, and biting when provoked, we're all human nature. But the teeth aren't that sharp, they can't bite. Biting and eating are two different things." "Yes, two different things," Li Yunxin said. Lu Laodao let out a sigh of relief in his heart. He didn't know what he was happy about. Then he began to talk about business, as if he had forgotten all his worries. "But there is still one thing I don't understand. Brother Xian, now that you've entered the city, you want Yunzi to think your hatred. But hatred and Qi-Wen are both Dragon Son. Brother Xian calls himself Qi-Wen. But you want him to think your hatred. Why?" "Because hatred has a bad reputation." Li Yunxin turned around and smiled at him. A quarter of an hour ago, this person had just bitten off a cultivator's head. Yazi's territory. I also heard it from others. It's said that it's in the Yi Kingdom and the Li Kingdom. But you've heard of him, right? What do people say about him? Hatred must be avenged, right? They also say he's cruel and impatient. A few days ago, when I was wandering in the city, I really saw a woman with a child. The child was crying, and the woman said Long Air would take him away if he cried again. Although the child ignored her and didn't do anything, it was obvious. Long Air and hatred don't have a good reputation. But Qi-Wen, what's the reputation of the Dragon King temple you built before? Lu Laodao thought for a while. Well, to be honest, everyone in the city of Wei knows Qi-Wen. The dragon has 9 sons, everyone knows it. But few people know that our Wei River Dragon King is Qi-Wen, according to the old people. And I used to think so. Our Wei River Dragon King is really a divine dragon. It's said that a long time ago, the divine dragon did show his divinity here. But let's talk about Qi-Wen. There's nothing to be afraid of. In the past, the 9th young master ate people. But the number of people he ate in a year, sigh. In this city of Wei, there were at least 100 people who died of illness, violence, old age, starvation and cold in a year. Those he harmed, no one really paid attention to. Li Yunxin patted his folding fan. That's it. Qi-Wen has a good reputation. A few days ago, I told you about people's power of faith, strong faith and weak faith. But there's one thing you haven't thought about. If you do a favor to someone, that person may not be grateful to you. Instead, he may be greedy. But if you hurt someone, just once, he will remember it. It's hard to make people worship and respect you, but it's too easy to make people fear you. So if that's the case, why do monsters show their supernatural power to do good? You know, if you help someone this time and don't do it next time, that person may scold you as a god. But if he scolds you, you immediately go to his house at night and eat his son. I guarantee that his whole family will remember you for the rest of their lives, and will fear and hate you intensely. What a strong faith it is. Lu Laodao exclaimed. Didn't they say, evil people will be eliminated by Daotong? That's the first reason. Li Yunxin sighed slightly. I only knew about this a few days ago. Fortunately, I didn't go the wrong way. You know there are yin and yang in the world, and yin and yang are important in cultivation. It's the same principle with the power of faith. Good and evil will give people strength, but just like yin and yang, they will restrain each other. It's not easy to have good thoughts, but it's easy to have evil thoughts. But the power of faith obtained by being feared and hated by people will also make people violent and impulsive. This is not a good thing. I was confused before. A big demon like the 9th young master could run amok in Wei River and city of Wei, And he also needed to eat the power of faith. But why was he so cautious? You see, he ate Li Yaoxi's concubine. She was the family of a governor. If people knew about this, it would cause a big uproar. But he only ate at night, and didn't show up much. Then he ate others. He ate in the temple in the wilderness, outside the city. Think about the big demon who wore the skin of young Master Qin. He ate the souls of domestic animals and beasts. But he didn't eat people easily. I originally thought it was a bit far-fetched to explain these things with reasons like love your nest, and don't eat the grass near your nest. But now I know. Even if they think that good thoughts are something they don't want the faith of evil thoughts. Lu Laodao's attention was attracted by this novel explanation. He frowned and thought for a while, and felt that it made sense. For a moment, he felt that he knew the secret of the cultivation world, and his heart was itching. He asked hurriedly, why don't they want the evil thoughts? That hatred in this case, isn't it evil thoughts? Li Yunxin shook his head slightly. I don't know about that. My friend in the city also doesn't know about the effects of evil thoughts. It's just that he has been a Yin master for a longer time than me, and he has more information channels, so he knows a little bit. Lord Dongting should know. Otherwise, why would he turn into priestly to eat people? But he won't tell me. But no matter what, I know that the power of faith brought by good thoughts and evil thoughts, to a certain extent, they are mutually exclusive. Li Yunxin sighed softly. If Yunzi is smart enough, he will make a fuss about this. If he is not smart enough, then he is dead. Yunzi frowned slightly, looking at Changpingzi who was sitting paralyzed on the ground. This was an emptiness realm Taoist, more than 130 years old this year. He was a disciple of the emptiness realm in his early years, but his aptitude was ordinary. However, Yunzi used to be a secular person, and later became a cultivator. Therefore, he knew that aptitude was not the only standard to judge whether a cultivator was worth befriending. Therefore, with the tactful attitude of a secular person, he treated almost everyone well, naturally, according to the standards of the cultivators. Therefore, when Changpingzi was sent to another sect after he was over 100 years old, and was stuck at the early void realm, this void realm Taoist with ordinary aptitude still had a good impression of Yu Yunzi, and still respected him as his master. This time, the more than 30 cultivators that Yunzi secretly gathered were probably in the same situation. Some were once his disciples, and had feelings for him. Some had received a favor from him, and owed him a favor, and had told him something along the lines of, I will repay you in the future. For cultivators, the phrase, I will repay you in the future, was not something that people in the secular world would say casually. No one liked to owe others a favor, because it could lead to a catastrophe. Because of this, Daotong and Kenzo did not advocate close master and disciple relationships, and only needed to follow the rules. But Yunzi cleverly used this set of rules that had been passed down for thousands of years, and won the favor of many people. Now this Changpingzi, who came because of their past relationship, sat paralyzed on the ground, muttering the same words over and over again. Catastrophe, catastrophe, it is a catastrophe after all. That terrible demon hit his ocean of qi and mountain of snow with a tyrannical spiritual power, while he was escaping. There was a huge gap between their realms. Changpingzi endured the terrible pain of losing his power, and returned to the station to explain the details. Now his whole body was slowly losing consciousness. He felt that this was a catastrophe. If he did not have that friendship, he would not have come to help his former master. And he would not have ended up like this. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.